But I'm, oh, it's the same line.
Right under the spot.
Hot. She's hot.
Test, test. Can everybody mute their Zooms and their computers? Everybody ready? Yep. Yeah. Ready? Okay.
Let's rock and roll.
Rock and roll, I like it. Good evening, Hermosa Beach. I think we're getting an echo, some feedback.
I think you have your,
Something's echoing.
Not mine.
up on the top.
Only if we don't want to have to turn on the all the Zoom should be muted.
You sound like an announcer,
Should be muted.
Chair. Sounds like an announcer.
Technical difficulties, Hermosa Beach. 1 second.
The other way. There you go.
Okay, good evening, Hermosa Beach. I'd like to call to order this Tuesday, October 29th, the Joint Parks, Recreation, and Community Resources Advisory and Public Works Commission meeting, special study session. It would be an honor and a pleasure to have Mark Mamber lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Could we get roll call, please?
Commissioner Maroney,
Here.
Commissioner Horowitz,
Here.
Commissioner Elman,
Here.
Vice Chair Pizer Maines,
Here.
Chair Lang,
Here.
Commissioner Grethen,
Here.
Commissioner Legville,
Here.
Commissioner Dunbabin,
Here.
Vice Chair Hayes,
Here.
and Chairperson Britton.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any announcements, any upcoming city events that the commission would like to recognize?
You know, I really don't have an announcement, but I would just like to say thank you to everyone who attended the Women's Club Pancake Breakfast. It was a great breakfast, and thank you.
I concur. Anything else, commissioners? No? Okay. Now we'll move on to the study session public comment.
This is the time for members of the public to address the commission on items on and not on the agenda, but within the commission's jurisdiction. Each speaker is limited to 2 minutes and will be taken in person only. A total of 30 minutes will be allocated for this comment period. As a reminder, another public comment period at the end of this meeting is reserved for those whose comments could not be heard during this first public comment opportunity. A reminder that if you address the commission on a discussion item, you will not be able to address the commission on the same item when it is heard at a later part of the meeting. First, we have Paul Torella.
Hi, good evening. I'm here to urge the city to create an off-leash area for dogs on the beach. 60% of Californians own dogs. The City and Parks Plan has consistently ignored 60% of its citizens for decades. The current policy is simply to fine our citizens $250, which to me is not a solution at all. So cities up and down the coast, from Santa Barbara to San Diego, have created off-leash dog areas to great success, and they're self-managed by the dog owners, and they're kept clean, and they're very successful. And I'm going to give you a list of the cities that have done this: Long Beach, Huntington Beach, Coronado Beach, North End, Del Mar Dog Beach, San Diego, Fiesta Island, Ocean Beach, Santa Barbara, Arroyo Burro Beach, Thousand Steps Beach, and Summerlin Beach. So the Parks and Rec plan has ignored 60% of its citizens for decades, and I think fining our citizens $250 for having their dogs off leash is not a solution at all. So, thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak during public comment? No? Okay. Moving on. So we'll close public comment and move to opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair Lang, and good evening to members of the Public Works Commission, as well as the Parks and Recreation Commission and members of the community. This is a great day. We're so excited to host this joint commission meeting. I think you both, as commissions, work so hard for the city to ensure that not just recreation space, but generally what people are able to do in the public right-of-way, whether it's visible or not visible, are provided the level of community member review that you all provide through your dedication. Wanted to just share with everyone that the 2004, I'm sorry, am I echoing possibly? No? A little bit? Thank you, thank you. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't our mics. So our 2024 Parks Master Plan study session this evening will serve as the first presentation of the final draft of the 2024 Parks Master Plan, which is a plan that would serve as a near and long-term planning tool that encapsulates a community's vision for its city parks and recreation facilities services. Give me one second. Sorry about that. It would encapsulate a community's vision for the city parks and recreation facilities, services, and programs for the next 30 years. This plan will help inform the city's future budget priorities and dedication for staffing resources, and was formed in alignment with the city's general plan. The Parks Master Plan serves as one of the foundations for community planning and development. The city's most recent Parks Master Plan was adopted in 1990, I should say, it isn't that old. The plan provided guidance to the city for the orderly development of parks, recreation, facilities, services, and programs through 2010. Since 2010, the city's recreation services, programs, and indoor and outdoor recreation facilities have evolved, including several new services, programs, and facilities. A new Parks Master Plan that reflects the evolving needs of the community for the next 30 years was needed. Tonight, the commissions may discuss and provide input on the draft plan to be shared with council at its November 12th meeting, when council is scheduled to consider approval of the 2024 Parks Master Plan. And before I introduce RJM Design, I did want to share that we were so pleased with the community engagement process that this plan brought forward, and I did want to compliment everyone that was involved. I think in large part, commissioners encouraged their neighbors to show up. I don't know that I saw this room as full as I did on those days, and that's very encouraging. Folks organized around the services that they'd like to see, which is exactly what we hope members of the community will do, and I think you saw that through this process. What I wanted to encourage everyone to consider is that whether something is included in the Parks Master Plan or not, it's not a set-in-stone document. We will regard it, as all cities do, as a living document. For instance, we had the last Parks Master Plan that was supposed to carry us through 1990. However, it didn't mean that all recreation and services ended in 1990. You saw this city continue to be very dynamic in responding to the needs of the community from that time to now. It will be the same with this Parks Master Plan. a lot of what it tends to be in a master plan is aspirational, but it's our role to help realize these aspirations on behalf of the city and the community. Much of it will depend on funding, future funding, which we cannot predict between now and 30 years from now, but we will all work toward ensuring that the aspirations that are covered in the plan that we work on to the extent possible with your help and the community's help. So with all to say, while certain things are not spelled out in a concrete way in a Parks Master Plan, which I think some people expected, it's a guide. It's a guide, and you all, as members of the commissions, as well as members of the community, will help us evolve what comes out from this guide. And so I do want everyone to treat this as a living document and not the final opportunity to ensure that the Parks and Recreation Plan for the next 30 years is somehow set right here. This is the start of a conversation and a framework and a guide, and we hope that the community that came out, as well as all community members that didn't come out during this time period, continue to engage with us to let us know how their needs evolve over the years. With that, I'd like to introduce the firm selected to help develop this plan, RJM Group Incorporated, and its principal landscape architect, Zachary Muting, to provide his presentation on the 2024 Parks Master Plan. Zach.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be invited back. I see a lot of familiar faces all around the room. It is hard to believe we got almost 50 people in this room during our workshops. We were literally wall to wall in this room, and it's exciting to be back here again today. I believe we have a presentation that's going to go on the screen.
Yes, we do. It's going to happen.
Sorry, I don't have a clicker. We'll use the
Next.
old school next tones. There we go. Next slide, please. As Suja mentioned earlier, the purpose of the master plan is really to set forth a vision, a guide for the management and implementation development of parks and recreation facilities here within Hermosa Beach. The most important thing is it's based on the community. We did extensive work reaching out to the community. As was mentioned earlier, we actually went through and compared it to the last 9 park and recreation master plans, and you have a higher average of attendance in your community than we have in several other master plans based on your size. You were above average in getting people in here and getting responses in. You have a very active community, which really bodes well because there's strong communication and collaboration here. This plan is based on those local community voices, the voices that we heard throughout this process. And as we go through this document, I'll share that information back with you, and then we'll also talk about the recommendations that we've formalized at the end of the document. Next slide, please. Based on 5 stages, first the inventory of existing conditions. We went out, looked at all the facilities, what you have, and then went through an extensive community engagement process, what the community wants. Then we balance those scales and then determine what you have, what the community wants, and we perform a needs analysis. From there, we develop the recommendations as well as funding and implementation strategies as you go forward. Next slide, please. You can see here on this timeline, we started early on in January, February 2023 with the existing document review. We looked at the inventory of all the recreation facilities, conditions, we toured everything, we photographed everything. As we went through all the sites, we developed a common terminology, an understanding of what the community has here in terms of recreation facilities. Then the bulk of this chart here, we went through from May through October, all sorts of different community outreach elements, stakeholder interviews, website updates, multimodal community surveys, online workshops, in-person workshops, multiple times. So that way, as we go through, we're able to hear the community's voice. At the conclusion of that, we develop the community needs assessment and then prepared a final report. Next slide, please. You can see here the inventory of existing conditions, some of the elements we went through, the existing background documentation. Where are the parks? Where are the facilities? What are the program elements that have been offered? As well as what are the demographics of the community? Next slide, please. Some of those things that we saw were 3 community parks, 6 neighborhood parks, 4 parkettes, a beautiful green belt, 8 green spaces, the beach, the pier, the plaza, the Strand, 6 recreation buildings, see listed here. As we went through, we had an understanding of what the community had, where they could recreate, some beautiful facilities throughout Hermosa Beach. Next slide, please. Also important is where those are located. So when we go through this process, we do a lot of mapping analysis. We map where the community voices come from, we map where the parks are, so we can start to see the overlap of that information. And here you see the inventory of parks and facilities located, distributed across Hermosa Beach. Next slide, please. And then we went through, as I mentioned, the inventory of the programs, everything from youth and adult services, classes, community events, health and well-being, organized sports, outdoor recreation programming, community facility rentals, senior programs, as well as special needs programs. Next slide, please. Some of those demographics that we looked at, according to the U.S. Census 2021 estimate, the population was at just over 19,314. And we look at the demographic makeup in terms of who are the youth, 19 and under, at 16%, 20 to 34 at 26%, the largest population, 35 to 64 at 46%, and then 13% for 16 and over. We also look at that in terms of the county average. You can see there the dashed line. In some areas, Hermosa Beach has lower averages, look at the under 19 population age, but it also has higher averages, the 20 to 64 ages. This is just one lens, one snapshot of whom the community might be as we go into the study. We talked about this throughout each one of our presentations to the community. This is just one measuring tool. This isn't the end-all be-all. We don't make recommendations solely based on this. This just helps guide us into what we might hear and see as we go into the community. Next slide, please. This brings us to our community outreach, which was quite extensive. We had actually above 6,000 touch points, and those are any interaction between the city planning process, the master plan, and the community base, the customer. We had 4,600 website views, 266 feedback submittals directly online. The feedback submittals are anything that can be submitted through the online website at any point in time during the project. That was open 24/7 throughout the life of the project. People provided us input all the way through. We had 12 stakeholder interviews. We received over 600 multimodal survey results, 86 results from Workshop 1, almost 250 surveys completed in Workshop 2, and 178 surveys in Workshop 3. Overall, we completed quite a bit, collected quite a bit of outreach. Also, next slide, please. We had several other additional functions that we looked at as well, too. I showed up to the beach cleanup and made sure that during some of the beach cleanup elements or some of the beautification in the community center is we had outreach events where we attended these events and talked to the community. We shared information about the process, shared the website, shared that they could participate in the workshops, and collected a feedback comments through that website as well, too, throughout this process. Flyers were distributed as well as posted on social media. Next slide, please. And here's that website, just a sample there of the feedback button. On that website, we collected over 266 comments there, but look at the distribution on the right-hand side. As we collect these comments, this is important, is we look at where these comments are coming from. So this way, if we hear something about X facilities, we can start to look at that, and where those comments are, we're able to provide some of those recommendations based on where they're coming from. Next slide, please. I want to share over the next several slides what those comments were that we heard as we went through this process. As we went through everything, we looked at it from both a machine standpoint and a human standpoint, meaning we read through everything. Does it make sense? Are our analytics coming back in line with what we're seeing and hearing from the community? And as we went through the feedback survey comments, some of the most outstanding items that we heard in terms of programs were code and policy enforcement, e-bike rules and safety, evaluate skate park rules, outdoor movies, more outdoor movies, parking permits, promote lawn bowling programs, security, and swimming classes. Some of the facility mentions that we heard most often in this category of the feedback comments included basketball court, benches, car charging stations, Clark Field improvements, community center improvements, dog park, fitness stations, green belt improvements, landscape maintenance, lawn bowling, clubhouse, pickleball court, playground upgrades, preserve open green spaces, skate park improvements, splash pad, strand improvements, and a swimming pool. Next slide, please. As I go through each one of these, you're going to start to hear commonalities. You're going to hear some of those elements repeated over and over. That's what I look for. I look for those common threads that come up in every outreach mode as we go through this process. We record how often we heard it, where we heard it, and that way, as we come to the end, we have a prioritized list of what we've heard throughout this entire process. Moving into some of the stakeholder interviews, things that we heard most often commonly in these were program needs, including concerts on the beach and the music festival, pickleball classes. In terms of park facilities, we heard swimming pool, e-bike traffic calming, ADA accessibility, Prospect School repurposing, remodeling the amphitheater at Valley Park, shade structures, teen and youth center. Next slide, please. We have several different questions through our stakeholder interviews as well, too, including what are the most important issues for Hermosa Beach related to the parks, recreation facilities, programs, and services currently being provided. We heard elements such as pickleball, again, the e-bike rules, park building improvements, landscape maintenance, code and policy enforcement, restrooms. Again, those common threads are starting to come up already right now. As we ask these questions in multiple different ways, we hear commonalities as we go through this process. Next question we asked were, what are the most important parks and recreation facilities, programs, and recreation services for the residents in the future? We heard elements such as community center improvements, ADA accessibility, the greenbelt benches, bike path on Strand, greenbelt improvements, park and facility improvements, as well as program-based or programs based on community desires. Next slide, please. Continuing on with some of the stakeholder questions we asked included, what does the Community Resource Department do best in providing parks, facilities, and programs and services to the community residents? We heard organized and promote special events. In fact, we heard the special events quite a bit throughout this entire process, very much loved by the community. We heard elements such as promote and develop programs for seniors and sports, after-school programs, communication, responsiveness to new residents and community needs, as well as youth programs. We asked the other side of the coin, question on that of, how can the Community Resources Department improve in providing parks, recreation facilities, programs, and services to the community residents? We heard elements such as develop collaborative partnerships, collaborate department involving communication and status updates of projects, making sure that communication is flowing freely between both the community and the departments themselves. As well as not overacting right away, is making sure that we balance some of these requests with the community so that way we have a priority of information coming in, so we're not just jumping at everything, as well as needing more resources and staff to support the residents' requests. Next slide, please. One of the things we also conducted was a statistically valid multimodal survey. Now, this survey was conducted with our pollster, so they conducted it across the entire community. And you can see here, again, looking at the distribution of where all those calls were made, where all the responses came in, we look at this and we find some information such as 81% of the respondents are satisfied with the maintenance of parks and recreation facilities here in Hermosa Beach. Just so you can understand where that benchmark sits, over the last 9 park and recreation master plans, the average was 75. Again, above average in that area. 48% get their news from of the respondents, 48% get their news of parks and recreation facilities and programs through the city's website. That's important. Again, looking back across the last 9 park and recreation master plans we've done, 37% was that average benchmark. So now as you're starting to market new programs and new elements, 48% of the respondents, at least on this one, statistically valid, are getting their information from the website. So having solid SEO optimization strategies would be important. 76% of the respondents are satisfied with recreation facilities and programs provided by the city of Hermosa Beach. And again, over the past 9 park and recreation master plans, the average was 67%. So you're above averages in each of these categories. So you're delivering quality goods and services as we move forward, but we also want to make sure that we continue that communication, that collaboration strategy, where we go forward in the future, what we're looking at down the road. Next slide, please. Part of that statistically valid multimodal survey, we also asked, what is one park feature, recreation facility you would like to see added or provided? And you can see here, the list actually goes on a lot longer here, but we stop generally around that 1%. In the appendices document, everything is categorized and recorded, so that way everything's in there. We collect all the information as we come to the end. We look for those common threads. We look for those elements that came up most often. And some of the elements that came up at the top here are public pool, pickleball courts, a dog park, Valley Park improvements, bathrooms, several different park improvements, elements such as skate park, community center improvements, even all the way through e-bike rules on the Strand. We asked the question, what is one recreation program, class, or activity you would like to see added or improved? Elements we heard from the multimodal survey included swimming pool, swimming lessons, a pickleball league, pickleball classes. Moving down the list included yoga, exercise, aerobic, cooking classes, dog training park, senior classes, tennis lessons, art classes, surfing, and so on and so forth through the rest of the survey there. Next slide, please. Then we come to the in-person workshops and the online surveys. We had 3 in-person workshops held in this room, and you can see the pictures there. Pretty impressive organization strategy, I got to tell you. On a staff standpoint, they had everything ready to go in here. It was organized very, very beautifully where we were able to get people in. We had our conversations, we had our discussions and a lively debates in here, and then we flowed out. So this room functioned very well for the amount of people we got in here. It was held throughout the process here, and I'll go through each one. Next slide, please. At each workshop, we had an in-person meeting. This particular one, workshop 1, was on June 27th, 2023, from 6 to 8. We had 44 people here, and we went through our process. I provided information. I provided a presentation on what we were doing, and then we went through a series of questions. I'm going to share those questions and responses we heard here, as well as after this, we had an online workshop for 2 weeks, where the presentation was online, and then people were able to take an online survey as well if they weren't able to make it to the in-person workshop. Again, there's a map on the right showing the distribution of those facilities. Nice, even distribution across the entire community. Next slide, please. Some of those questions we asked that night were, what are the most important community characteristics? And what we heard from the respondents of this workshop, both online and in person, included the beach, the ocean, the community itself, the events, again, there's the events, outdoors, the parks, the restaurants, the safety, the small town feel, and the walkability. We asked another question that night, what are the issues or trends that may be negatively impacting these community characteristics? And we heard discussions such as the e-bike rules, homelessness, the lack of a dog park, lack of funding, parking, pedestrian street safety. The last question we asked were, what role can the Community Resources and Public Works Department play to address these issues? Elements that we heard that night included communication, community engagement, enforce e-bike rules, events, maintenance, pickleball, and provide a dog area. A lot of those common threads continue to come up as we go through this process and we reach out and review all of these different workshop and outreach strategies. Next slide, please. Workshop 2 was conducted on August 10th, 2023 from 6 to 8 p.m. Again, in this room, we had 35 people in person, and then we had 214 online for the rest of the 2-week online portion of this workshop. Almost 250 people total for that second workshop, and you can see again the distribution on the right-hand side, clean distribution across the entire community. Next slide, please. Questions that we asked at Workshop 2 included, what park or recreation facility do members of your household visit the most often? And we heard elements such as the beach, the Pier Plaza, the Strand, Clark Field, the Greenbelt, South Park and Valley Park. We also asked, what is one park feature or recreation facility you would like to see added or improved within the community? And we heard a community pool, dog area or dog park, lawn bowling, clubhouse, pickleball courts, Strand improvements. Then we asked the question, what is one recreation program, class, or activity you would like to see added or improved? We heard elements of concerts, dog training, e-bike safety program, pickleball, swimming, theater programming. Again, those common elements keep coming up as we go through the process itself. I'm going to grab questions, I think, at the end, or did you want to pause for questions now?
Quickly, while we're on this, when you're referring to online workshop, are you referring to people that went online after the workshop and answered the survey?
Correct. These include all responses from in-person and online.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. Workshop number 3 was held October 4th, 6 to 8 p.m. here at City Hall again. We had 33 people in person and 145 participants online. And you can see there the distribution of community members across the city itself again. Next slide. Questions we asked at Workshop 3 were, we provided information on everything we had heard to date. And then we asked the participants, choose your top 5 park feature or recreation facilities you would most like to see added or improved in Hermosa Beach. Out of everything we had heard through the process, we shared it all back. And what we had heard from the answer to that question is Strand improvements, a swimming pool, a dog park, bike lanes or bike infrastructure, preserve open space or green space. We also asked another question is, please choose your top 5 program, classes, or activities you would most like to see added or improved in Hermosa Beach. Again, we shared everything we had heard up to that point, asked the question, and from the responses we got, concerts, code and policy enforcement, e-bike rules and safety, continue to expand special events, swimming, security to prevent overnight camping. Next slide, please. What we do after we collect all that information from the small group stakeholder interviews, from the workshops, workshop 1, workshop 2, workshop 3, the feedback comments, which is the public community at large comments, as well as the statistically valid multimodal survey comments. We look through all of that. We review everything and categorize it to what those comments were, and then we start to rank them. Next slide, please. And you can see here from this chart what came up the most often. If it came in all three of those modes, the statistically valid, the small group, as well as the public workshops, it was identified as a frequent component, that it came up in all three of our outreach methodologies. If it came up in 2 of those outreach methodologies, we identified it as apparent. If it only came up in 1 methodology, it was classified as identified. And here you can see that list of items that came up most often based on what we heard from the community. Clark Field improvements, community center improvements, dog park, greenbelt improvements, improved landscape maintenance, lawn building, clubhouse, pickleball court, restrooms, skate park improvements, strand improvements, and a swimming pool. Next slide, please. We did that same thing for the programs. We looked at the small group responses, the public community responses from workshop 1, 2, and 3, as well as the feedback comments, and then the statistically valid multimodal survey comments. Categorized them all, identified them, and I put them into the frequent, apparent, and identified categories. Next slide, please. And we came up with this list here based on the community responses, art classes, camps, code and policy enforcement, concerts, continue to expand special events, e-bike rules and safety programs, movies, pickleball classes, senior programs, swimming, youth activities and programs. Next slide, please. With that information, the prioritization list, we then move into looking at a gap analysis. Where are the parks? Are there gaps? Now that we know what the community wants, we compare that back with where the facilities are, what do we see throughout the community. And when we look at this community, you actually have 100% coverage, which is very rare in most communities. A lot of your acreage is actually the beachfront. You have an amazing greenbelt you can see, the spine going right through the community as well. 100% of your residents live within a 10-minute walking distance to a city facility, according to all of our GIS analysis. Next slide, please. As we go through this process, we do, again, I talked about earlier on, those layerings, the different mapping analysis that we go through. Where are parks? What are the neighborhood park radiuses? Where did we hear elements the most often? Through workshop 1, workshop 2, workshop 3, or is there a concentration of elements, a concentration of responses that might identify where we could potentially put some of these services? In a number of cases, they were across the entire community. It showed, one, a demand for some of those services, but also elements where it might just be concentrated and we can look for areas within the community to develop some of these services. Next slide, please. That brings us to our key strategies and recommendations. Next slide, please. Based on everything we had heard, all of the prioritized programs, facilities that the community was looking for, we developed 6 key strategies to help the city move forward in a vision of what the community is looking forward to in the future to recreate and play and work here in Hermosa Beach. Now I'm going to go through each one of these. Each one of these key strategies is then paired with a specific goal based on that prioritization list that we saw earlier of those facilities and programs. Next slide, please. Key strategy 1 is celebrate the community's athleticism and sports history through facility improvements at the Clark Complex. The first goal in this key strategy would be address the demand for pickleball through balancing schedule for open play, reservations, and programming at the pickleball courts. Goal 2, 1.2, is to improve community gathering and athletic events through Clark Field improvements. Goal 1.3 is embrace and support sports activities through lawn bowling clubhouse improvements. Next slide, please. Key strategy 2 deals with preserving community quality of life through policy enforcement and funding strategies. Specific goals under this key strategy include establish landscape design standards for the Greenbelt. Goal 2.2 is balance facility use with maintenance levels of service supported by increased funding and staff. Goal 2.3 is continue enforcement of the Strand violations to preserve recreation enjoyment for residents and visitors. Enforcement of those codes. Next slide, please. Goal 2.4, under this key strategy 2, includes revisit high-impact level events for staffing needs to ensure safe and quality experience. Goal 2.5 is continue to support the Bike Smart Hermosa program. Goal 2.6, develop and implement a maintenance tracking system for restroom facilities. Next slide, please. Key strategy number 3 looks at exploring opportunities to strengthen community relations and develop joint use facilities for all to enjoy. Goal 3.1 under this key strategy would be foster partnerships to support aquatic programs and activities. Goal 3.2 is explore feasibility to provide a dog park, dog-friendly amenities while considering maintenance and costs and neighborhood impact. Key strategy 4, next slide please, includes modernized community center complex with improved vehicular access to increase facility availability to the community. Specifically, 4.1 is improve the community center complex focusing on access, identity, and communications. Goal 4.2 is reconnect community by modernizing skateboarding opportunities within the city. Next slide, please. Key strategy 5 is pursue community-inspired programming opportunities. As was mentioned earlier too, this is a living document. As the community grows, programs will continue to shift. And they're always in flux with different trends and different elements as we come through. And one of the unique things about this document is we've laid the groundwork for how to collect data, how to go through the community, and we've seen a lot of good communication between the city staff and the community. So as we move forward into the future, continuing to revisit these is a healthy thing, so that way we know these programs are always in line with the community is looking for. What we've heard specifically under this key strategy, the goals we've developed, are continue to develop and revive community programs with regular outreach and dialogue. Specific elements include camps, senior programs, youth activity and programs, art classes, concerts, special events, and more outdoor movies. Next slide, please. Key strategy 6 deals with continued investment in the city's existing first-class parks infrastructure resources. The first goal here is continue to prioritize completion of deferred maintenance on existing parks over new facilities. Goal 6.2 is continue to evaluate and adjust contract maintenance services versus in-house parks and facility maintenance. Next slide. As we went through our document and developed all those key strategies and goals, we looked at the existing CIP, capital improvement projects for 24-25. That was also part of the attachment for the document tonight. And you can see here listed, as we go through, we found that several of them are actually in process that the community was looking for now. Some of those CIP projects, such as the Clark Field improvements, were part of currently funded CIP programs. The Greenbelt programs, Greenbelt projects. There are also beach restroom projects that are underway and Clark complex improvements that are listed in this CIP project list. Next slide, please. As part of that CIP, the 24-25 CIP, we also found that there are unfunded future CIP projects that are listed that are in line with some of these key strategies and goals, which include lighting for facility design and construction for the Clark complex. Clark Stadium bleachers were also listed in here, as well as several other public facility and ground improvements. Next slide. In addition, what we've provided as well in this document is master plan recommended projects. Based on our tour of the facilities, RJM's professional recommendations of the conditions we found, we identified a list of park improvements as well as building improvements. A number of those also match up with some of these key strategies and goals that we've identified earlier based on the community's requests. Next slide, please. In order to pay for all of this, we have to come down to the funding section. Funding is different in today's landscape. It's focused more on underserved or disadvantaged communities. Hermosa Beach does not fit that normal mold. So you're at a disadvantage a little bit here, is when you go for the large state or federal funding programs, you're going to be outcompeted in a lot of these areas. Doesn't mean you just ignore them. You almost have to have an in-house grant writer who looks at these all the time and goes through them. You're going to find more funding sources on smaller donation elements and smaller sponsorships. Yes, we're still going to have the CDBGs, OGLs, LA County grants and funds, but you're also going to have to look more for some of those specialty elements, such as the MLB, MLBPA, Baseball Tomorrow, or easier defined as Youth Development Foundation. Looking at some of those 501c3 specialty groups that you can create here with your local organizations to go to specific elements. Starting to look for some of those resources will really start to identify smaller price points, but that's where you're going to get some of those funding strategies. Next slide, please. Specifically, developing them through partnerships, MOUs, joint memorandum of understandings, joint use agreements with local school district, local businesses, and nonprofit organizations such as we mentioned the Youth Development Foundation earlier. Doesn't mean you ignore the large federal and state ones. I've seen different organizations, districts, actually get funds because everybody thought they were going to be outcompeted. So here we are in today's landscape. You're going to have to compete for the large elements, but you're going to find more success in some of those smaller $500, $1,000, $10,000 elements with smaller price points and grouping several of those together. But that is almost a full-time grant writer position to go after all of those. Next slide, please. In order to really tackle this, investing in our parks and recreation resources has tremendous health and recreation benefits for your community. When we look at this and we put forth the maintenance and meet the needs of the community expectations, we're really investing in the future of our residents. And by investing in the staff and infrastructure, we can ensure that these parks and facilities are safe, attractive, sustainable, and provide a high level of service to the satisfaction of our users here within the community of Hermosa Beach. Next slide, please. I appreciate everybody's time. I hope I wasn't too long. I know somebody's got the baseball scores on their phones. I see somebody with an LA sweater in the audience here. I'm sure he has them. I hope I didn't take too long. This was a very exciting process. I really enjoy going through these because I get to hear from the community, and then I get to see what you have. And it's a very simple equation of this is what I've heard and this is what I've seen, and that's how we present the material here. It is a living document. It's a long-term document. And in order to accomplish all of these features and elements will take time. It will also take funding and strategy as you move forward collectively with multiple departments and the community as you transition into the future. I'd like to turn it over now to Lisa and Joe for closing comments.
Thank you, Zachary. Before we turn it over to Chair Lang to open it up to commissioner questions, we would like to provide a follow-up presentation to provide a snapshot of the Community Resources and Public Works Department's current and pending projects, how some of these projects may meet the recommendations outlined in the Parks Master Plan, and how we may move forward on the Parks Master Plan and what needs to be considered in order for us to move forward. Next slide. So to summarize, some of this might be repetitive from Zachary's presentation, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the slides that were previously shared. So overall, this plan does include recommendations that involve several different areas of parks and recreation. That includes department policies and practices, development of partnerships to enhance services and increase access to recreation facilities, programming, city infrastructure improvements, enforcement, and staffing. Next slide. So these recommendations are for the city to consider throughout the next 30 years. Next slide. The adopted budget and capital improvement program for this budget year really provides for a back to basics strategy regarding city infrastructure with a focus on prioritizing deferred maintenance and safety projects here in the city. Therefore, it is very important to note for tonight's discussion that with the currently programmed CIP, staff workload will remain extremely heavy for the next 2 to 3 fiscal years with little capacity to take on new projects. Therefore, the advancement of recommendations pertaining to city infrastructure outlined in the 2024 Parks Master Plan would certainly require a council discussion to consider whether to delay other program CIPs until a future fiscal year, modify their timelines. Additionally, what will also need to be considered is the project capital and future maintenance cost of the project, the impact on staff resources, and the available funding that would have to be considered to advance the project. Next slide. Additionally, we wanted to note for tonight's discussion that the Community Resources Department and the Parks Commission are tasked with several City Council-directed policy projects pertaining to department policies that staff hopes to bring to completion throughout the next 2 fiscal years. These projects have been on the Parks Commission and Department's work plan, I should say, since 2017. We have had little time to advance these projects, and with the assistance of some of the new team members that we will be gaining for the management of the special event and filming programs, we will be able to begin the work on these projects. We have developed action plans from these projects. We've done lots of best practice work, but we have not had time to advance them to the Commission and City Council for consideration. And there's some items that our Public Works team also will need to support these projects on. So these projects include the updated Clark, am I on the right? Sorry, just wanted to make sure we're on the right slide. The updated Clark Building use policy and fee structure, which we plan to bring to the Commission and Council at the start of the new year before the building is back open for use. The volleyball court use policy, which we plan to resume following the adoption of the Clark Building items. This work does also include not only the development of a use policy, there currently is not one for our volleyball courts, either in the residential or the commercial zone. It will also include the development of a legacy beach volleyball events policy to honor events that have been part of our community's fabric for decades that take place in the residential zone, which our special event policy guide does not allow for currently. So we need to develop a policy to bring to the Commission and City Council to consider how we can have these events go through the special event permit program. And it also includes a review of current maintenance practices throughout the residential zone. So for those who do not know, the commercial zone is from 10th to 15th Street on the beach. Everything outside of that is considered the residential zone. And we also have the work of the municipal lease policy, which we would plan to resume following the completion of the volleyball work. So this policy would really include eligibility requirements for someone to lease a city facility, a review and approval process. Currently, there is not a review and approval process by the Commission and City Council, so that would be addressed in the municipal lease policy work. It would consider lease rates. There has been a market rate study of city facilities that was done in 2020 that would serve as a guiding document for those rates. It would consider general lease terms, and this would all be with special consideration for our community organizations such as the Lawn Bowling Club, Kiwanis Club, and Rotary Clubs that use city facilities to ensure that their use of these facilities and their output of services is not interrupted in any way through this work. So the work of the volleyball court use policy and the municipal lease policy will require the support of the Public Works Department. Therefore, the advancement of recommendations outlined in the 2024 Parks Master Plan would also certainly have to require City Council to have a discussion on the timeline of these projects that we have had outstanding on our work plan here in the Community Resources Department and with our Parks Commission subcommittees. Next slide. With that said, several current project or scheduled projects in the near future fall within the overarching themes of the recommendations outlined in the Parks Master Plan, which are known as key strategies, and would meet goals of certain recommendations as well that are outlined in the Parks Master Plan. So the table on this slide, Zachary had previously shared, and this really shows the current capital improvement projects that meet a key strategy or goal outlined in the Parks Master Plan. So just to provide a little bit extra detail, I know Zachary did touch on this. Current CIP projects, we have key strategy 1 that calls for improvements of the Clark Complex. There's several CIPs that are in works to meet this key strategy. We have a city park lighting conceptual design CIP that would assess the lighting of Clark Field and Valley Park and South Park, but to speak to this specific recommendation, it would be Clark Field. We have the Kelly Courts renovation project of the basketball courts, the pickleball courts, and tennis courts. We have the city's facilities condition and needs assessment, which would provide for a building assessment of the lawn bowling club. And of course, we have the renovation of the Clark building, which is currently underway. And then key strategy 2 involves preserving the quality of life of the community. It included recommendations for bathroom improvements. It was a common theme throughout community engagement that the improvements were specifically for the 14th Street Beach Restrooms project, which is a current CIP, and improved access to the Greenbelt with the Greenbelt Pedestrian Trail project, which is underway. Next slide. And on this slide, you will see examples of which goals would be met through current or scheduled policy or program work that the Community Resources Department has on its work plan or is actively working on now. With the Kelly Courts renovation, the design is showing we will likely be able to have 4 pickleball courts once again instead of the 2 currently available for play. Before completion of this project, staff would reinstate a subcommittee and stakeholder group to explore policy modifications that would allow us to balance the open play and reservations of the pickleball court, which is a goal outlined in the Parks Master Plan. And so we would have that subcommittee and stakeholder group explore having 2 of the 4 courts free of reservation for open play only, and then 2 available for reservations. And we would look into programming such as classes and a pickleball league. This meets goal 1.1 that you see on the slide before you under key strategy 1. And also under key strategy 1, we have goal 1.3. This goal was really to embrace and support the activities through the lawn bowling clubhouse, and one specific recommendation was to form an agreement with the lawn bowling club. This would be completed with the work of the municipal lease policy. And under key strategy 3 here on this slide, goal 3.1 outlines a recommendation to consider a joint use agreement with other agencies to allow for resident access to a pool and aquatic programming. Staff has been in very preliminary discussions with surrounding agencies and would continue to explore such partnerships. And then under key strategy 5, goal 5.1 calls for more community outreach and dialogue to develop and refine recreation programs. Staff is currently working on initiating an evaluation system for all our existing programs, specifically through the contract class program, which includes all recreation classes, camps, and leagues that we offer through our department. And through this, we want to seek information on desired programs. Staff would also explore the feasibility of providing more programs in-house that are city staffed, hosted, and ran. Strengthen the relationships with nonprofit organizations for joint programming and events, and explore joint use agreements for shared use of facilities so we are able to expand our programming, because we will have more recreation facilities to do so through these joint use agreements. Next slide. So to close out this presentation is a very brief overview of the maintenance and staffing recommendations outlined in the Parks Master Plan. All programs offered by the Community Resources Department require the support of the Public Works Department. There are very little services and programs that we offer that Public Works is not our backbone in being able to offer those services and programs. So everything Community Resources touches, Public Works is touching it too. So we just really wanted to make that clear, and that's why it was so important for us to have an assessment of not only the Community Resources Department, but also the Public Works Department. Staffing shortages were identified in the assessment for both departments. 2 of the staffing recommendations for community resources that you see outlined in the Parks Master Plan have been met, with the addition of the 2 new special events and filming positions. For the Public Works Department, the operations and maintenance team remains stretched, limiting the ability to meet the current and future needs of the parks and facilities given the high level of deferred maintenance. It is important to note that this assessment was formed based on our existing programs, services, and challenges. So these staffing recommendations do not speak to what would be needed to as far as resources for these recommendations that are outlined in this Parks Master Plan. The staffing assessment was based on, again, our current services, programs, and challenges that we have. So this does conclude the presentation, and I will go ahead and turn it over to Chair Lang for commissioner questions.
Lisa, thank you very much. RJM, thank you very much as well. We decided prior to the meeting that we will adjourn for about 5 minutes to take a break, use the restroom, stretch our legs, and then we'll come back for commission questions. How long should we adjourn for, Patrick? 5 minutes? 5 minutes, everybody? Okay, 5 minutes. Okay.
I can leave it. Yes. See each other.
Did we get a score for the game?
You want it?
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
5 Yankees, 4 Dodgers, top of 6, and bottom 5.
Top of six.
Top 6.
Oh, wow. Okay. Woo. Awesome. Okay, so hope everybody enjoyed their recess. Once again, the presentations were spectacular, and Lisa, thank you for bringing everything to the table. So right now, we will jump into commission questions. I will start with to my left, and then we'll work to my right. At this point, commission has the opportunity to ask questions of RJM as well as staff. So Kathy, take it away.
Yep, thank you, Ani. First of all, I really didn't have any questions. I thought your report was very detailed, and there were just, as far as the swimming pool went, I didn't see a location mentioned or a budget. And we have a big ocean out here, and we also have swimming pools in our neighboring cities. There was one thing about modernizing the skateboarding. I mean, how do you modernize a skateboard area?
So actually, we do design skate park facilities as well too, and we bring in specialists who are pro skateboarders when we develop those. We look at skateboarding as it's actually changed over the years from, gosh, when Tony Hawk first started skateboarding in deep pools to different plaza flows, snake runs, different styles of skate parks. And what we have here in Hermosa Beach is a smaller than average skate park size. So really the size and the types of elements that you have in that skate park need to be improved. And what we've seen and what we've written here too is looking at different sizes of facilities or working in different elements of skateboarding components that you would have more of like a flow run or a plaza style. What we have now, and we're developing a new skate park, deals a lot with texture. If you could, when I started skateboarding a very long time ago, I'm not going to use dates or anything like that. We didn't have double fin boards back then, but you had the nostalgia of rolling over bricks, the click, 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 click of wheels. Different textures, different types of plaza elements that we grew up skateboarding in that are actually not in your park facility, but are replicated in a lot of other park facilities. So kind of going back to those, the guerrilla style of we found a place to skateboard, bringing those elements into skate park designs nowadays are more of a modern element for skateboarding facilities.
And my last question is on the dog park. Did y'all investigate any place where Hermosa Beach could put a dog park? Because right now we're limited in our children's parks. And so I didn't know if y'all got into that detailed.
We do design dog parks, and having 1 to 2 acres of available space is very, very, very difficult to find here in town. So looking at alternative methods to that is we can't place a park specifically anywhere, but we can start with adding in some of those dog-friendly features, making sure that some of those dog elements or even dog runs are available on a smaller scale size to the community residents, so that way we have dog-friendly amenities, and then some smaller dog runs will start to address that need as we go forward into the future. But size is a constraint. We just don't have a lot of land that we can grab 2 acres from anywhere.
Right. And that's all I have for right now. I'll turn it over to David.
Thank you, Kathy. I've got 2 questions related to input you received beyond that from the general public, and 2 questions that might give a little insight as to, if you will, how the sausage is made in analyzing the data and developing recommendations from that. So along the first line, there's talk about 12 quote-unquote stakeholder interviews. In this case, were the stakeholders government officials, I believe? Was it 5 council members, 5 park and rec commissioners, and 2 subcommittee members from Public Works? Is that how you got to 12? Or?
Yes.
Yes, those were the stakeholders. It wasn't necessarily 12 interviews. We interviewed 12 stakeholders. Some of our commissioners were paired up for those interviews.
Okay, oh, okay. And I'll just ask for the record, did staff review the draft PM and PMP?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, we did. And as well as the Parks Master Plan subcommittees of the Parks Commission and the Public Works Commission.
Thanks for reminding me. And then, sort of as how you combine some of your input. One thing I looked at is these so-called CPSCs, which I forget what it stands for, but it's how you look at develop metrics for needs versus capabilities of how many fields you have and what size for different types of sports and the like. And I noticed a couple places where we looked like we had a surplus or were adequate just purely based on what the raw, the pure analysis would say. But at the same time, we still came up with some recommendations to do more in those areas. So one of those was for the skate park, was for skate parks, and the other was for pickleball. So maybe you could say a few words about how you combine that with some of the other input to get to your recommendations.
So one of the metrics that we look at, the CPSCs, the Custom Park Standards Calculation, is where we look at, we have a special sports organization or participation analysis where we look at how many people are playing X sport, how many members are on a team, or how often people skateboard during a day. And then we put that into an analysis and simply quantify it based on how long people would stay at a park, what an average stay is at a park, average pickleball game, how long those last, and that way we can kind of compare the two of how long that lasts, how many people visit, how many facilities you would need. And based on those metrics, you'll always run into a popularity. Everybody likes to play on Fridays, or everybody likes to play on Thursdays. When we go through those, we take that analysis into consideration, but we look at it as an entire week-long cycle. So that way, this facility has 8 hours of playtime every day. So when we look at that, we've identified those surplus and deficits. With skateboarding specifically, the number of facilities available, we count that as one. That's based on a 10,000 square foot average of what we consider a skateboarding facility. You have current needs in here of 0.2 and a surplus of 0.8. So you have enough size of skateboarding facility, but when we look at the actual amenities in that skateboarding facility, what we're hearing in terms of skateboarding is what we talked about earlier, upgrading, updating those facility elements within that space. In terms of pickleball, was the other one you had mentioned?
Yeah.
In terms of pickleball, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to remember it all here. In terms of pickleball, when we look at that, the total facilities available at the time of this assessment was 2. The current needs was 2.2. I believe all 4 are going to be online.
Yes, that is the plan, that we will have all 4 courts
So
to meet the need.
Now you can see how this document is a living document, and that's going to come up. And that's based on 7 days a week, those courts being available, is you have room for all the pickleball programming and elements based on a 4-court model.
Okay. And then my last question goes back to analyzing the data and the input data from the public. We received a pretty extensive e-comment from one of our residents who may or may not speak. But I guess what I might ask to build confidence in the results is it appears that you're relying on a lot of experience in doing this. I know you do this done it a lot of times before, and I of course know from having been a subcommittee member, had some visibility. Could you maybe just talk about some of the potential pitfalls you might run into where you might find that you're overweighting data, you might, to recognize if you're hearing too much from one area that doesn't seem consistent, or if I don't know, just anything that your experience, helps you to do sanity checks and how you avoid some of those pitfalls. So you can say as much or little as you want on that.
You might have to get the hook on this one because I like this topic. I'm a bit of a data nerd here. When we go through it, the best way to do it, and this is what I recommended, what we proposed on for Hermosa Beach, and you guys adopted it, was the full method. Use both quantitative and qualitative metrics, not just one. You have to go through all of them, and I tell this to all of my clients. and I recommend it to everybody who wants to go through an assessment like this, is if you just had, say, one workshop, we just want to have one workshop, you're not going to get enough information. Because you can see, each workshop is different. The tone of the entire Parks Master Plan is really based on the types of facilities and programs. And we've asked the question several different ways through each one of these venues. But if you only had one segment of it, a qualitative workshop, you're only going to get one segment of the population who might participate in a one evening event. You're not going to get the entire population at it. So that's why we have to then pair it with the online side of things as well too, to make it available for those people who like to do the digital devices. So then we cover that metric, because it comes down to a psychology on how people are going to want to participate. We have to make sure we're offering it in as many different ways as possible, both the in-person, the direct, both the online, the indirect, as well as the quantitative, statistically valid multimodal survey to make sure that we have a statistical representation. So as we go through these, the in-person, the qualitative side of things, the feedback comments for people who might have been on vacation during one of our workshops, or might not have been able to make it for whatever reason, can participate at any point in time throughout the process. We take all of that information together, we put it into a machine learning system to where the machine looks through it and identifies elements, but we also do a lot of reading, because we do a human analysis, kind of like that sanity check you were talking about too. As we read through it, I'm at every workshop. One of the benefits of being at every workshop myself with my project manager, Kristen, is I can say from a first-hand standpoint, I heard this at the workshop. I see this analysis is coming through in the right direction based on what I heard, based on what I read. So as we go through this, that holistic view of both the quantitative and qualitative provides really a measurable demand of what the community is looking for, but also the subtleties of that user experience, enabling what the community's recommendations truly are from the qualitative and quantitative being mixed together. Sorry, that's the hook, I can tell. But it is quite a bit of community input, but when you put the community together in a room and everybody comes with different ideas, when they start talking to each other and we start looking at each other in the faces, what happens is we realize those goals are often in line and we come to a consensus. So those consensus workshops start to develop all that information that we presented earlier, and those common threads float to the surface. And then we can see where those community priorities lie.
Great response, thanks. Thank you, Chair Britton. I'm done.
Okay. Just to jump on that last comment, do you have any reservations about the results, about the analysis?
No, and I would talk about those as we go through each one of the methods. I look at the geographic distribution. I also look at the return on investment, how many people we're getting in.
Right.
As we're going through that process, if I have reservations, I bring up right away, because I don't want to get to tonight and say, I feel kind of nervous about the data. We didn't have representation in this area. Mm-hmm. So as we go through, we look at that the entire way, and you actually have above average.
Great. As the other commissioner, I find it interesting that people who live on a beach want a swimming pool. And I'm kind of interested, were there any specific wants or needs articulated that a pool would provide and the ocean would not?
Elements that we heard from the community included swim lessons, included splash pad, and included a recreation swim. Mm-hmm. Those were the elements that were highlighted that we heard most often.
Okay. Got it. Okay. One of the things that just kind of jumps out in my mind, and I just wanted to bring it up as an open question for everyone here, actually, is looking at the plan and knowing what kind of budget we have. It's obvious that we can't do everything, and not everyone can get what they want, but everyone needs to be heard, which has been done. And I'm kind of curious, what do we as a community, as Hermosa Beach, I've only been here for 5 years, so I'm the new guy, but what do we want to be known for? You know, Santa Monica has Pacific Park. Venice Beach has the beautiful, huge skate park right on the beach, right? There's golf course in PV, and Kings Harbor and Redondo. So if we were to choose something and say, people go to Hermosa for this, people live in Hermosa for this, you know, that's the spot. I think that could be a useful guideline just to kind of think about. What do we want to be known for if we can't do everything? What would really differentiate us for the residents, for the visitors? And I think that's something I want to throw out there as something for people to reflect over. The other thing, so it's more of a comment, the other thing I'm curious about is there's been mention about additional resources needed, and we know we need additional resources for maintenance. There's also consumables, there's things that break or wear out, and I'm kind of curious, that wasn't really touched upon as far as budget. Are we talking 2 extra positions on the maintenance staff? Are we talking 20, or 5, or what kind of background and expertise would they need, and do we have budget for it? It's great to be aspirational. I just want to see where can we actually start and what can we actually start doing. Not sure who would be best to answer it, but I'm curious.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure my mic was on, sorry. There is not a budget to meet the staffing recommendations. We did request funding in this year's budget for this fiscal year to move on some of the recommendations that we saw for the Community Resources Department for the oversight of the Special Event Permit Program and the Film Still Photo Permit Program. The oversight of those programs were, and still are because both positions are not yet filled, managed by the Community Resources Director and the Senior Rec Supervisor, which are the top 2 leadership positions in the department. So we found it very difficult to advance any special projects, create policy, create programming, enhance services and programmings with the management of those programs in those 2 positions. Through the staffing assessment, we found that even above just general department oversight, the vast majority of our time was spent managing those 2 programs. And that's even over just general department oversight. And again, it being your 2 leadership positions, we did request funds to get those 2 positions in this budget cycle because of what we found in the staffing assessment. The answer for Public Works is a little bit more complicated because there is a very comprehensive, I believe it's the maintenance plan that we have and recommendations to consider the possibility of maybe eliminating some of our contract services and having more of those services performed by in-house staff. So their recommendations for staffing are a little bit more complex because it has that as one of the recommendations as well. So with consideration of that, it would ultimately determine how many more staff members were needed in the maintenance and operations team.
Okay. Thank you.
You spoke in your report quite a few times about using 501c3 for funding. Can you explain what that involves?
So development of a nonprofit group is common in quite a few cities where there is a partnership between the city and a nonprofit group where that nonprofit group would say, take care of XYZ facility. They would collect funds and set aside those funds specific for development of a said facility. So that way, rather than just increasing budgets and sprinkling the money around everywhere, as you'd start to utilize these smaller organizations to almost be stewards. However, what that generates is the demand for those partnerships is really, as we spoke about too towards the end of the presentation, making sure that those partnerships are strong and the development of those organizations, those 501c3 nonprofit organizations, have strong relationships and collaborative elements with the city, that they truly are hand-in-hand operations.
But that funding is private, not public?
That would be private then, and then private donations to a public facility.
Okay.
We've developed several trails and facilities with other communities specifically through those funds.
Okay. You talk about potentially using joint use agreements for example, a swimming pool. Can you explain how that would work?
Did you want to talk about current developments?
Go ahead. I was
All
just
right, I'll go
making sure
through
my
that.
mic was on.
With swimming pools, a lot of times with what we recommend is swimming pools are very expensive, very big land users. And so what we do is we actually start to recommend, first and foremost, working with local school facilities, local school districts to have a joint use program, because schools will operate the pool for a certain time during the school season. Then during summer months, sometimes there are league and swim meets in there, but there's also a lot of free time that those pools sit, starting to capitalize on the availability of that pool resource as a joint use partnership, working with the school district. There are several different agreement types to kind of pull off of. is being able to utilize those facilities when they're not used by the school district. So that way you capitalize on that pool existing in there in the ground, not having to build one, but you're starting to build your swim programs through that available resource.
So is that a pay per use? Does the city pay a fee and they get to program it however they want, or?
That would be part of those negotiations that you go through once you start to develop that. And as I mentioned, there are several different metrics to that. That depends entirely on the collaborative working with the school district.
And then similar to what David was talking about with the CPSCs, the one, he talked about a couple of the ones that I had questions about, but the big one is volleyball, where it makes it look like there is an ungodly amount of surplus. And if you've been out there on a Saturday or a Sunday, it just isn't. So is that a matter of, yeah, if you average it over 7 days in a week, there's a lot of
Yes.
surplus, but
Yes.
there's a deficit
Yes.
on the
If
weekends?
you go out on the weekend, that's when I want to play.
Right.
That's when I'm not at work. That's when my kids are not at school. Yes. So you're right. It is averaged over the entire week. It is not a Saturday. So if we were just do a 1 day a week, that's a completely different metric.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yes.
And then this question's for Lisa. I saw a number that I thought was probably wrong online today about the cost of putting the master plan together. Can you talk about what the budget was, what the costs to date, and maybe anticipated I imagine that we're real close to complete. So can you talk about the funding a little bit?
I certainly can. In the 2022-23 fiscal year budget, we did estimate $650,000 for the completion of this project. That included a project manager and the firm itself to develop the plan. We came at a maximum total, including a 20% contingency for both the project manager and the firm selected to develop the plan, RJM, of $261,384. So that is the maximum amount that will be spent. We have not used any of the contingency for the project manager. We have had to use approximately $6,000 for the firm. We did have an extensive review process that included our entire internal staff working group and our subcommittee, that we had a little bit of back and forth on our review and input of comments, just to allow every single staff member the opportunity to review that plan from every single city department. So that is what resulted in us needing to use the contingency, was just those extra rounds of reviews and conversations with input from staff and our subcommittee members.
So when this is done and we receive and file this at the next city council meeting, there's approximately $390,000 that goes back to the general fund?
Yeah, so since this was developed prior to us adopting the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget, those funds were already reallocated back into the general fund.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So you knew that it was going to come in under and
Yes.
gave the money back already?
yes.
Got it. Yep, that's it for me.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you. I was at all three workshops, and it was amazing how well you pulled it together with all the diversity that came out. I have a couple questions for Joe and Lisa. Of all the list of those, which ones of those are already in process? Or completed?
I'm so sorry, can you restate the question?
Yes, which one of those of the lists are already in process or have been completed?
Of the recommendations outlined in the plan? So that is what I touched on in my presentation. Several of the goals are going to be met through existing established work or pending work of the Community Resources Department and Capital Improvement
I know, but
Projects
I think
program.
it's
So-
worth repeating after we saw the presentation.
Definitely. So let me pull up my presentation here. So, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong document. So it would be some of the goals outlined in Key Strategy 1 and Key Strategy 2, which pertain to the Clark facility improvements and just preserving the quality of life for the community with the recommendations for bathroom improvements. This is a 14th Street beach bathroom, the improved access to the green belt, the existence of the work through the municipal police policy resulting in a lawn bowling club agreement, staff's plans to initiate evaluation system for existing programs so that we are able to gather community input to see what programs they do not see in the contract class program that are currently being offered and how we can offer those, and joint use agreements to expand the access that we have to program and additional recreation facilities. The pickleball recommendation to balance the play at the courts with open play and reservations, possibly initiating the stakeholder group and the subcommittee to look at the possibility of having 2 courts free of reservation, so we could have open play, 2 courts that are available for reservation, and classes and leagues available through the contract class program for the community to sign up for. So those are just a few examples of existing work that will meet some of the goals of the Parks Master Plan.
Okay, so a lot of the things that were requested have been started and continued. It seems like some of the new projects are the ones that are maybe in question. And if you had to look at those new ones, which ones would be priorities as far as expense in reality? By that I mean what we'd have space for, what the complications are, the cost, also what would complicate the budget. I know Joe did a very thorough, wonderful presentation on the budget and has everything worked out. So we are covering the major CIP projects. But looking at these new ones, which would really complicate the budget or would make it strategically difficult priority-wise?
The recommendations involving city infrastructure would certainly require a city council discussion on modifying other established community capital improvement projects that we already have scheduled for. And it really just will require other CIPs and possibly policy work that we have already established as a need and have dedicated staff resources to modify those timelines for those projects.
I understand that, but knowing that, which ones of the new projects would be priority or low priority because of the cost or the complications or other things?
So let me see if I can try to tackle that question,
Okay.
Commissioner Britton. Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
So right now what we have in our CIP is we have 38 projects in the CIP. Shut that one up. Can you hear me here? Yeah. Thank you. So there are 38 projects currently programmed in our CIP. 21 of those are outlined in line with some of the goals of the Parks Master Plan. So more than half of our CIP is aligned with goals and objectives outlined in the master plan. Of the 21 projects that are in there, many of them are in process. Some are not scheduled to begin until a year or 2 years out because of the workload that is in the CIP and the sequencing that City Council approved. And not all the projects that are started are fully funded. One thing that we outlined when we went to budget study session is that our currently programmed CIP is not fully funded. So projects like the 14th Street restroom live in the CIP program, but do not have enough funding to advance them through full design and construction. So currently, we do need to identify funding to complete the CIP as programmed. We have a number of several other projects that are parks related that we have on our long-term CIP, our unfunded or deferred list, which have no funding and are not currently programmed. So any new project that does come out of the Parks Master Plan, and there are no specific projects that are identified, would need to compete against those projects, and council would have to determine how to allocate funds, and then should we reprioritize how funding is allocated in the CIP? And then more importantly, how does that impact sequencing against other currently funded projects or other known unfunded projects? So I think right now there's no current priority for how these go. I think our master plan provides that long-term vision, and it's something that the community can always work with. Come to city council meetings, and council will have to make a determination of how projects advance over time based on availability of funding and staffing.
Thank you for the turnaround. I guess where I'm going with is some of the projects are just upgrades, like the skate park and the Clark building and the restrooms. Some of the new concepts was like a swimming pool or the dog park, are things that are totally new projects. That would be a totally different funding and different projects that would have to be considered as a new CIP project as it related to funding, correct?
Absolutely. And those efforts would all have to receive additional scoping to understand, where, how big they would be, what the costs would be, and what the long-term operational costs would be to maintain those facilities. Because it's not just the upfront capital costs, it would be the long-term O&M, so long-term operating costs as well as the staffing support that would have to go with it, and the programmatic impacts that would likely go across multiple departments, including Public Works and Community Resources.
Okay, another question is regarding 501c3 funds. Do we have any project now, or do you know any of the past that have been funded by nonprofit organizations?
Yes. We currently have agreements with Hermosa Beach Little League. They had made improvements to the baseball diamond at Clark Field. We currently have a use agreement with them. Public Works also has an agreement with South Bay Parkland Conservancy, which is nonprofit. They raise funds to help maintain portions of the Greenbelt and provide native plantings in the Greenbelt. Those are just a couple that I can mention, and Lisa likely has more.
I don't have more to share as far as capital improvement projects, but there's been other park projects that have been supported by nonprofit organizations, such as Friends of the Parks or Leadership Hermosa at Valley Park.
Thank you.
And I also have to clarify my calculations on the total cost for the Parks Master Plan. So just to dive into it a little bit more, because my overall total was not correct. It's 126, including the 20% contingency for the project manager, and 261,384 for the firm to develop. That makes a total of 387,384. But again, that includes the 20% contingency for both the project manager and the firm. And again, we have not used any of the contingency for the project manager, and approximately 6,000 for the firm to develop. So we would still be coming under budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Public Works, we appreciate your feedback. Moving forward, you'll be hearing from the Parks and Rec Commission. Just for clarification, Zach, stoked you recognize the skate park, that it's old and antiquated, but at least we have one. But as far as priorities go, that's lowest on the list right now, but I'm stoked on that. And then also I'd like to remind everybody that as a result of, since this study's been completed, we have already brought concerts back. So we've heard the community loud and clear, and we brought them back. So thank you, Lisa, and Parks and Rec, and everybody else who worked on that project. 2 questions regarding your feedback. You had mentioned strand improvements. Do you recall any details that people were citing when it came to strand improvements?
Do we have anything we can reference specifically?
Separate bike-ins, separate lanes for bike and pedestrian.
Just going over with my project manager here, a lot of the bike lanes came up quite a bit. The e-bike policy came up quite a bit with the strand improvements. What were some of the others? We do have a record of all of them in the appendices. There's a long list.
Separate lanes for walking and biking.
Okay.
There were a number of suggestions and requests, and those
Perfect.
are all kind of included in there.
Cool.
When we categorize all those together, it was built into that kind of strand improvement element.
it.
Rather than one or another, we lumped them together in that way to kind of identify them. But they are all recorded within the appendices. I could come back if you would like and have that detailed.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. And then one last question. You had mentioned enhanced or expanded special events. Do you recall anything specific? Because once again, you're dealing with Parks and Rec folks, so that's kind of our field of expertise. So if you have anything that you can recollect, we'd be stoked to hear that.
The special events, that was, we heard a lot of the comments on the special events for the movies. Heard a lot of the movies in the. Oh, can you hear me now? Sorry, I have it. Hello? There we go. Sorry about that. So a lot of the special events that we heard, that I recall going through when we were doing this, developing it, I heard a lot about the movies. A lot of people loved the movies and the concerts. Those were a really big thing. In fact, the concerts were almost brought up quite a bit in all of the community outreach, the workshops and the feedback comments. That was something that came up quite a bit in there in terms of the activities and the programs. When I know during COVID they disappeared and now they are back, that was one of the largest things that we had heard, because we were studying them during a period where they weren't available to the community. As they came back, I think you've probably started to address that. However, I would say making sure that we stay on top of it and check in every now and then with the community and make sure that these are still in line with their views as they go forward, say in another 5 years. Keep in touch with the community. Are we still in line with what you're looking for in terms of the movies and park and the concerts? Those were the two biggest things that I heard quite often throughout this. Again, I'll go through the appendices and just get a quick email memo coming back to you guys as here's all the mentions. Those were the top ones that I recall off the top of my head.
Cool, awesome, thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. So let me bring this a little closer. First of all, this is an exciting moment to see the final draft of the Parks Master Plan, and I want to acknowledge everybody's work that went into it, including my colleagues, the colleagues on the other commission, and the public at large. And thank you to the public that is here, in spite of it being a very important Dodgers game, so thank you for that. It shows your commitment and dedication to the city as well. I don't want to be a party pooper, but I do want to mention that I was disappointed that we received access to a copy of the draft with not much time to go through all the amazing documentation. We received it just maybe a day or two in advance of when we'd regularly receive things for a meeting. And I mean, there's so much there. And unfortunately, I didn't have the time. I wasn't on the subcommittee. I didn't have the time, and some of, I know my other colleagues didn't have time to go through it as thoroughly as we would want to. Adding it all up, it was almost 900 pages of documents to go through in a thoughtful manner. So I feel not as prepared as I would like to be. I tried my best to go through it all, and after this meeting, I plan to do some more digging into it. I highly recommend everyone who has not had a chance to go through the attachments. The appendix is rich with information, and I really want to spend a lot of time on that because if we would have had more time, I think a lot of my questions would have been answered. A lot of things are in there, but because of that, shortened time, it was a bit of a disservice, I feel. So I just want to be open and honest about that with everybody. I do appreciate everybody's work, and I think it's a great document, but you know, we do try to do our best here. So that being said, I'm going to go through. I have a bunch of different thoughts. I'm going to condense things. And thank you, Commissioner. But I'll start with what Jan was saying. Let's see. In terms of the, I was also thinking that we do need to give a sense of prioritization, and we do have projects that I've heard from vast segments of the community that they feel is a priority. We do have the Clark Center. It's very the Clark Building. We're moving on that, so that's a really exciting thing because we've heard a lot of that over the last year or so. The theater, the community theater, I know that's, we've done an assessment on that. We've invested in an assessment. The 14th Street restrooms, the bollards, and everything else. I think we need to look at some of the existing things as prioritization because anything new that's in this report is going to be a long process, as has been mentioned, and we're really going to have to look very hard at feasibility of these projects. I'm sorry?
What a comment, not question.
Oh, comment? Comment. Questions, not comments? Oh, okay, okay. So questions. So, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. I didn't know we had both that we were going to be doing. Okay. So my question is on the engagement. I was looking at the numbers, and I am wondering, in terms of the total impressions, the total engagement, if you were able to, it would be probably a difficult task, but how many of those are repeat customers? You know, had several bites of the apple? Because I know for me, I've gone onto for the website impressions and views, I've probably gone on there a dozen or more times. I went to every single community workshop, and the list goes on. And I'm sure that the more engaged and aware members of the community, they also probably have multiple, chances for input.
Yes.
So I'm curious about that because these numbers look really great. We reached out to the community, but I just wonder how much overlap that there is with that.
So there is a possibility for overlap because anybody who came to the workshop can also submit feedback comments. And in terms of the feedback comments, we don't restrict those. You can send 1, 2, 10, 15 in. When we do go through those, we actually go through it with a couple different elements. We go through with first a computer analysis to see did somebody go in and just copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. So we filter those through. And then we do the human analysis as well too to kind of balance it and perform that sanity check. I like that term. I'm going to keep going back to that one too. There is a possibility where somebody might have gotten that phone call of the multimodal survey and participated in the workshop. So there is a potential for overlap in there. But as we go through this process, we carefully monitor it to make sure that we don't have hijacking, to make sure that we don't have anything that creeps up to where an anomaly might start to develop that is a request for a certain type of facility or program that doesn't really mesh with what we're hearing. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very particular about being at everything. I go to every workshop, I do all the presentations, that way I see and hear everything coming in. So as we have a single point of contact, that human analysis paired with the staff and computer analysis, we really monitor it to make sure that there aren't any hiccups throughout it. But yes, there is, short answer, the possibility someone can have a couple elements in there. It is very much a reality in terms of the multiple workshops. You came to all of them, and I appreciate that. I like people to come to all of them. I like them to be involved in the entire journey, but we do all of those modes qualitatively and quantitatively, specifically designed to maximize the input and to allow somebody to have that two-way dialogue. I was at the first workshop, I heard this, I changed my mind, now I want that. And that enables that growth and development of the qualitative process.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, one more question. In regards to the dog park issue, I was doing a little bit of my own kind of looking around and seeing, what is out there, what, standards are, and what does your knowledge tell you in terms of the average size or the recommended size of a dog park?
So I look for a 2-acre site when we start to do our dog park designs and developments. We look for those because what you're going to have is you're going to have parking because dog parks are vehicular centric. People drive to their dog parks. And then you're also going to have support facilities as well as the dog facilities themselves too. So 2 acres total site size. We do like to have large dog, small dog areas as well as individual dog areas when we do a design. So you can see it's a very large element so you start to land that spaceship. But in order to start to really work within the dog community here is start to, what we've recommended here, promote doing some of those policy elements, starting to put dog-friendly elements out there, the doggy dispensers out there, available dog runs out there available so you can get some off-leash activity with your pet in a park area. So having those dog runs is appropriate. Dog parks are large, and so that 2-acre total site size is a beginning point. We have done larger dog parks, but that would be your beginning point.
And you need a buffer too,
Yes,
in a community like this.
Then we start talking about neighborhoods, sound buffers,
Right,
exactly,
right.
exactly.
And what are sizes of dog runs, and what do you really get out of that?
Well, and that would be like an individual dog element. And we always put those in our dog park designs because when you have, one of the elements that we like to promote too is when you have dog parks, having an individual dog element allows the dog to start to acclimate, to get used to other dogs in the area. So that's what kind of dog runs are for, is having a dog in an area with people around where they can interact in an open environment, not just your backyard, in a, confined space for that dog. So that's a dog run. Dog run sizes can vary. There's not one specific set size for that. I can't give you a square footage on that one.
So would we need to do, for something like that, if we're limiting it to like a dog, will we have to then do a parks program where people have to sign their dog up and do a membership?
So individual dog runs are usually first come, first serve. Are usually first come, first serve, and that's what a lot of our park facilities
Yeah.
are for those dog parks.
Yeah, just asking. Thank you.
Oh, you have? I have. Thank you, Zach. A few questions going back between you two. So first of all, Zach, could you tell me what I was approached by a resident today. What's the difference between a multimodal survey versus a scientific survey?
I love that question. Thank you. Again, the data nerd in me. So we communicate. I'm sorry. This is a very intimidating microphone. I'm scared to get too close to it. The multimodal survey is unique because it's a statistically valid survey, and it's not too dissimilar in terms of, and I'm going to be careful with the academic definitions here, a scientific survey. It has changed over the years because we communicate differently over the years. Some of us text, some of us email, some of us talk on the telephone. In order to do a statistically valid multimodal survey, we hire a pollster who does a lot of surveying for political polls and whatnot. We've hired them specifically to craft and do the outreach and the validity testing of this survey so it matches the demographics of the community. When we look at the data, we have to make sure we have so many households of this size and this characteristic and this demographic to match the demographics of the community when that data point comes in. So the overall survey is within, I believe, a 5% margin of error, a 5.1, 5.2% margin of error for the sample size. But that means the multimodal survey has got to include all of the different modes available for communication in order to make it statistically valid. It has to match the demographics. So a scientific survey would be more along the lines of a traditional telephone demographic matching. The multimodal survey allows texting, emailing, telephone calling, and in multiple languages.
Would one, so you're saying that both are valid, but one right now in the year 2024 is more useful, maybe more valid?
My understanding of the scientific survey one is traditional. What we used to use 10 years ago was just a telephone survey. It was just a telephone survey, and it was just landlines, actually. And believe it or not, I know the plain old telephone lines, the ones with the cord, if you guys can remember that one. My kids still don't believe me. But yeah, so we've actually adapted the new methodology, the multimodal survey, because our pollster tells us that yields more accurate results for today's world. People move all over and they carry their cell phone numbers with them. So if you started in Indiana and now you live here, you have that Indiana phone number here. So when they collect their phone numbers or the emails or the polls or the texts, they do it based on your geographic region. It might have phone numbers from all over in the world. Very interesting science. I can't speak to any more depth how that works because that's my political pollster who does that. But it's based on any method of communication that they have, modern day communication strategies.
Okay, so are there cities that have volunteer grant writers? I think I'm looking to both.
Volunteer?
You had made a comment that we could possibly need to hire someone. So my question is that something that we could consider?
No fruit.
I'm not aware of any city that kind of has a full-time volunteer grant writer. I have been aware of certain members of the community kind of taking a look at a singular grant and helping, but it's never really, they never kind of do the entirety of it. They kind of put together the pieces, and then it usually falls on staff to put those pieces together.
Have we ever had a project?
Maybe I can answer that. Nonprofit groups have often written grants, and we're working on that now with the Park and Rec through the Arts Foundation. But I know that Kiwanis, as a nonprofit, has done grants and donated things. So nonprofit groups in the city can maybe hire the grant writer.
Okay.
or the grant writer would do the grant and build their salary into the grant?
So I can give one example. I know we worked in partnership with the South Bay Parkland Conservancy where they took the lead on a grant for a state grant, but staff was actively involved with it. So they did put a lot of the legwork into it and help do some of the agency coordination at no cost to the city for a grant that we were trying to seek. But I will say that there is some technical requirements for some grants depending on the complexity of the project. So it really just depends on what it is and how much staff engagement would have to be involved to help determine the validity of the application, to make sure that all the scope is correct and that the cost estimates are aligned with it. I think one of the challenges with grants is scoping it and understanding what the requirements are of any type of grant, what the deadline's going to be to spend those funds, and how you have to spend those funds. And so it really just depends on the program.
Okay. Next question is, have we looked into branding any of our facilities where unfortunately or fortunately we would put a business logo on a city building? Is that anything we've considered?
The naming policy outlines a review and approval process to consider such a partnership. We have not been approached by any businesses for that, to name a facility after it, but
So we've already
that's
been
definitely
thinking forward. We've already started the process.
Yeah,
So
we already have a policy that would have a review and approval process for such a partnership through the Parks Commission, through a Parks Commission subcommittee, if directed by City Council to have them look at it with a City Council subcommittee.
Okay. Have we talked to the school district about a mixed-use program with them, with their fields and their buildings for some of our projects, including, and I will say this, and I don't want any phone calls, but maybe we could move a pickleball court to the north end of town on the weekends, or on the east side, so that we can get to people all through the city rather than only in one area?
Not that specific idea, but we've had preliminary conversations with the former superintendent about our desire to explore a joint use agreement with the school district.
So that's on our list of 2025?
Yes, those types of agreements can now be further looked into by myself and the senior recreation supervisor for the Community Resources Department, and we could open up those conversations with the new superintendent now.
Okay. And just to be sure I understand, the difference between a dog park and a dog run, can we go over that one more time? I don't think I have that
Dog run is
down.
much smaller for an individual dog.
When you say an individual dog, we
One
would...
dog, singular.
One dog at a time.
Really?
Many private homes have dog runs.
Right, but it's so Manhattan Beach has, are we just going to call those very small dog parks? But most people that aren't in the know are calling them dog runs? Is that where I might be able to go with that?
I'd have to review their size, Manhattan Beach, off the top of my head.
Okay, maybe someone on the other end of the table will have some update on that. Lisa, can you tell me what an example of joint use would be?
Certainly. So joint use agreements can be negotiated in many ways. One example would be going back to the school district conversations. It would allow the city access to school district facilities to program recreation programs, classes, camps, leagues, whatever it may be. It could be a joint use agreement that's formed as a new facility is being built. So it's just, each agency would essentially help fund and move that project along. So it really, each joint use agreement can be negotiated in many different ways. Another example would be if we entered into a joint use agreement conversation with an agency that had a pool. An idea that would come to mind is developing a membership program to where residents could pay into a membership program to access those aquatic facilities and programs that they offer at that site. So it could take on many different forms.
Are we looking at that? You sort of were talking about the pool. Are we looking into something like that for 25, or is this just on our list of ideas of how we can help the residents find use of a pool?
We have had very preliminary discussions with other agencies, but this would need to be a city council directed initiative because we would have to consider, the pending special projects that I outlined and CIPs that are already programmed. That would be most likely something we'd want to create a Parks Commission subcommittee to assist staff in reviewing and being a part of. So we would like to have that conversation at the council level to ensure that they're considering the timeline of the municipal police policy, volleyball court use subcommittee work, and making sure our Clark building work doesn't get further delayed.
Okay. There was a comment about e-bikes and safety, but we have or had a program with the schools and the police department that, from what I've heard, has been somewhat successful. We've seen the kids using their helmets on their heads, not attached to their bikes, that they've been trained a number of times. So we can put that in our semi-successful joint program with the school district and the city.
Definitely. And the recommendation in the Parks Master Plan is really acknowledging those programs, and just the recommendation simply is to continue the efforts that we have made, that our police department has made with the school district on education.
Okay. I had one more question, but I don't think it's in front of me right now, so I will reserve my right to come back and ask.
Barbara, if you don't mind, could I ask about the e-bikes and I was reading in their information, or in some information, about the Bike Smart program. Lisa, do you know about it?
Yes, that is an initiative of our Hermosa Beach Police Department, and it really is educating our community on safe e-bike practices, and it's in joint with it's with the school district too, to make sure that we are educating the students as well through that Bike Smart program.
Thank you, Barbara.
I'm done.
Tracy?
Is this on? Oh, yes. The thoroughness of my fellow commissioners is impressive. I do have a couple questions, though. Zach, thank you for the presentation and the report. It was so detailed, but I want to pick out a couple things. You mentioned the community center improvements as one of the key strategies, and I'm wondering, was that from your assessment or was that community input? You talked about like expanding parking and vehicle flow, and I just wondered where that was coming from.
The community center improvements were what we heard out of the community responses.
Okay.
Again, I can go through and get some detailed stuff and provide that back from the appendices. But I also did look at it myself from a review standpoint of checking in. Parking was something that I heard quite a bit of, so I did actually go through and do analysis on the square footage, the usage, and the available parking facilities. It used to be a school building, which
Yes.
is a completely different parking model than a community center. That right there was just kind of the indicator going, okay, I understand why I'm hearing this, why I'm seeing it. So, yeah, so it's kind of, I did look at it, yes, and kind of confirm some of the things that I'm hearing. I will get you a detailed list as part of that memo that I'm sending back as well with the detailed
thanks.
elements.
Okay, and then second, you mentioned twice in your report the need for a project manager. And I'm trying to remember exactly where it had to do with the Kiwanis and the Rotary Building, and then again on page 86, but now I don't know where that is. And I'm just wondering if you could dive into that a little more about what you would see that project manager doing. That was part of the staff assessment. Bless you.
Bless you.
That was the project manager analyst portion. Joe, did you want to talk a little bit about, or Lisa, the project management, bringing in that staff member?
Sure, thank you, Zach. Yeah, that was as part of a detailed staffing assessment that we did across our operations and maintenance team to really look at the current service levels and demands on the team, and there was a shortfall identified. I think during that process last budget cycle, we did add staff, but the shortfall was greater than what we added. And so I think what Lisa had noted earlier was that part of that, what we're doing is absorbing the new staff that we've added, also looking at a balance between our contracts and what we do in-house and external. And separately, there was also a recommendation to have a just designated almost project manager to help lead certain efforts in the Public Works Operation Maintenance team, just to help further supplement that staff. But I think it really just underscores the level of workload that's on that team and just really trying to identify what potential holes we could fill to help meet current workload demand.
Yeah, the pressures of the workload on both your teams is extraordinary. And I noticed in there as well, it talked about, and this is for you, Joe, it talked about using Public Works staff and retraining them rather than outsourcing some of the work. And I was curious about your feelings and thoughts on that.
Sure, I think, it's always a balance between how to do things most efficiently. And so I think there is a higher cost to have staff in-house with all the benefits and wages and things like that. And it can often be cheaper to bring in contract workers. But the challenge is that it's not always 100% efficient because staff has to provide oversight for those services. And so I think what we're constantly doing is looking at our contracts to see where the best balance is between contracting out for efficiency, but where we can minimize the oversight need. And there are potentially some areas that we're looking at where we might, when we do go back out to bid for certain contract services, we might adjust the level of what we keep in-house versus what we bid out, or whether or not we want to completely change some of those contracts to bring in some different expertise. Of course, any adjustments in our contract services or rebalancing of our workload will have budgetary impacts. So is it a higher contract value when we award a new contract for maintenance services, or if we're looking to raise staffing levels, we'd also have to find additional funding to pay for any increase in staffing levels. So I think it's a long-term look as we continue to manage the contracts that we have and we look forward.
Okay, thanks. I think it's definitely a balancing act between the staff, the money, the budget, the CIPs, and then all the aspirational future wants and needs of the community. And I think those things have to marry, but I'll save comments for later. I think that's it for now.
All right, Zach, I'm the last one for questions. And what I really want to do is just to ask you some questions to get some clarity as to what the new recommendations are. You gave us a chart that showed the CIP projects that are in progress, that have money. You've given us a chart of the CIP projects that council has approved and we just don't have the money for, or we haven't started. And then you gave us a chart of recommendations. So I just want to make sure that I'm correct in what I see as recommendations. I read the report as recommending Clark Field improvements beyond the existing CIPs. Is that correct? Meaning improvements to the field of play, to the bleachers, to the seating.
Yes, there were a number of recommendations made.
Right. And that's beyond, Joe, that's beyond the current CIP improvements for Clark Field.
I think it also integrates the currently planned projects that we have, whether they're in the CIP, because we have projects that are currently programmed that are addressing needs in the Clark complex. We also have identified unfunded projects in the CIP that are known. And I think this even kind of goes a little bit beyond to just say more holistically, that was a priority from the community to continue to advance improvements to that field. So I think collectively, we're kind of looking at the long term, but we are incrementally making progress towards it.
All right, and Little League has given an outline of what those future improvements might look like?
My understanding is they have a proposal for what they'd like to try to advance, and how that advances will have to be determined, based on funding, whether or not that's something that can be raised from them outside, and also integrated into the work plan, which ultimately council would have to decide on how that goes forward, because there would have to be some type of agreement with Little League if that were to go forward, and we'd have to understand if funding is available and then what the workload impact would be on staff to help support that effort as well. So nothing is determined at this point, but I think we're just underscoring that that was a community desire in the larger plan.
All right, Zach, you have a recommendation that there be some sort of renovations or improvements to the skate park without committing to what those might look like. So they could be small bore or large bore.
Modernizing the skate park with new skate park amenities, yes.
Right. And then the master plan recommends lawn bowling improvements to the clubhouse beyond the existing, what's existing now is a commitment to assess the condition of the lawn bowling clubhouse. The recommendation is that we actually, assuming the assessment comes in as we expect, that we actually go forward with those improvements.
To the lawn bowling, yes.
Right. On the pool, your recommendation is that there's no space. Okay. Did you look at any specific locations in town?
So when we started to look at the parks and facilities, we noticed a number of different things, and I think some of them were brought up earlier as well too, is the zoning and land use around. A lot of residential areas around here. We're very well built out in this town. You don't have a lot of land space. We design park facilities, we design pool facilities, skate park facilities, dog park facilities, and there are right areas to land them. They are very expensive elements, but when you have the possibility to put your toes in the water, no pun intended here, with the school district, that's where you want to start. You want to start to build your aquatics programs with those joint use agreements, so that way you can build them up and then start to look in the area for potential facilities. But I'll tell you right now, just our initial assessment of the park facility coverage and then the land use, very similar to the dog park element, is it takes a large amount of land to land the spaceship for a pool. And initial pass, I don't see a quick, easy opportunity area for that here. Was there a thorough, exhaustive search of all the parcels? No.
Similar question with strand improvements. I don't see that as a recommendation, but it certainly shows up in the report several times as something that the community might want to look at. Do you have a recommendation as to whether or not there should be a separate bike and walk lane or other strand improvements?
We did hear several mentions from the community for strand improvements, and I do have a comment earlier that I will get back to the commission here with all those detail elements that we did here on the strand improvements. Bike lanes was one of them, one of the requested community improvements.
All right, but if you've given us a list of recommendations. Strand improvement is not on it. Am I to draw from that a conclusion that, at least at this time, you don't think that's something that you are recommending as the consultant we hired to give us recommendations on what to do in the future?
1 second here, I'm pulling that up out of the report. Strand improvements was heard many times throughout all of our workshops, as well as the community feedback elements. When we look at strand improvements specifically, as I mentioned, I'm gonna have to get back to you on the detailed list that we heard from the community. However, on key strategy 2, we do bring up strand improvements to mainly really look at those enforcing and educating the safety, the e-bike codes. Looking at that was one of the main things that we heard primarily when it came up with strand improvements. So it was a safety aspect is the recommendation in there. There are no physical improvements that we've recommended as part of that key strategy.
All right. And Joe, question for you. There's a recommendation with respect to the Prospect School, the old Prospect School next to Fort Lots of Luck, or Fun. What is in the Prospect building right now?
That building is currently used for storage for the city, for Public Works. We currently don't have sufficient storage in the city yard for all the equipment needs that we have. And so that is actively used as storage for parts and equipment in other city storage needs. But There's not a lot of activity in that building. It's not fully habitable on a regular basis beyond just general storage needs.
Is that stuff that could be put elsewhere or not?
So that's something that will have to be taken into consideration with this new city yard project. There's really not any additional storage locations that we have. We use that building out of necessity, but the building would need substantial renovations. It has been long since identified as an unfunded future project to do something with that building, but it would require substantial renovation.
Right, and the do something, what is the do something? Do we have any specific ideas on what we might do with that building?
It hasn't been determined, to my knowledge, of what to do with it other beyond storage, but we would have to solve the storage need first. But I think that would be an open discussion of how to proceed.
All right, that's all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you, Tom. All right, so that will conclude commission questions. Now I'd like to open it up to study session public comment.
This is the time for members of the public to address the commission on the study session item only. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. When called, please state your name for the record. We will begin with members of the public wishing to provide public comment in our chamber.
It's 11:04 and NPA.
Who's ahead? Yankee?
11:04.
Earlier.
Did they say 11:04 Yankee?
Can you start adding them once I get the first
Oh
one?
my God. Yeah.
Well, good news is we might get to see one New York tomorrow, and then it comes back. That's a 3-hour.
So Patrick, before we start with a public comment, are we still shooting for a 9 o'clock closure, or are we going until everything's addressed?
This is, nope,
Okay,
there's no hard time limit tonight.
okay, cool, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
First, we have Angelica Craig.
Oh,
Hello, wonderful people of Hermosa Beach, with all your great work. When it comes to swimming pools, they're a delight, but they can be extremely dangerous. Young kids not being properly supervised and all that kind of thing. It's almost better not being run by a city, or certainly not like the kind of pool, like beg pool, where you beg never to go there again. It's got so many, things going on. It's kind of a mess in terms of cleanliness. But what we do have is we have a 24-hour fitness just behind Vaughn's. And why don't we just say to the neighborly city that has that property there, that we should just promote it as a good place for them kids to go of all kinds of ages. And there they will be supervised according to every parent or caretaker. And we have that facility, and there's other facilities nearby. So I think with everything we have in our city, we're doing a great job. Swimming pools, probably a better thing not to worry about, is my opinion, as an urban planner. Thank you.
Next, we have Nancy, forgive me.
Hi, my name is Nancy Schwabhack. I live on North Hermosa Avenue. So the city manager in her opening remarks said this new plan was needed. The last one was 12 years outdated. Why not wait until the city's fully staffed so we could project manage it in-house, sorry, John, and save up to $130,000? That said, clearly a lot of work went into this. I really do appreciate the effort, the diligence, the empirical data, the efforts of the commission, and the work product is, as Lauren said, very dense. So a lot of work went into it. However, to my point of why did we need to do this now and spend the money now, I think anyone in this room would have been able to identify the major takeaways and the priorities, some of which are already in the works without needing this study. Number one, maintenance and upkeep of existing facilities, including restrooms and landscaping. Number two, public safety and homelessness was mentioned a couple of times. Pickleball, always pickleball, the dog park, the Strand and other public area regulations and enforcement, the Strand improvements, and movies and concerts. I mean, I knew that before I read the report. Again, you have empirical data, you have a lot of background, you have a lot of other stuff to make clear that those are among the priorities, but they just are. And then we have, others have said, a lot of recommendations that we can't implement, and that goes again to we don't have funding for existing projects and the existing stuff we're trying to do. So why put together an aspirational list for things that we're not going to be able to afford, but maybe we can afford them 20 years from now and this report will still be living. It's also my understanding that if we go forward with the latest, in my mind, misguided initiative of the brand new Civic Center, we'll lose the skate park and perhaps some tennis courts and pickleball courts. I don't know the exact design. I didn't go to that meeting, but I understand it's where the skate park is. So don't know if those are mutually exclusive, just asking the question. So I think given current funding limitations, I had trouble following the numbers, sorry, Lisa. I think it's close to $400,000 was approved, not all of that was spent. I'm told additional funds were spent writing the RFPs to retain these two. I just think all that money could have been better spent on actually fixing things that needed to be fixed and we know need to be fixed and aren't being funded. Thank you again for all the hard work. I really mean it.
Next, we have Paul Tordella.
So I'm kind of a one-topic guy. Dog Beach. Dog Beach is virtually free. Okay? It requires no staff. If any of you have been to a dog beach in Southern California, there's no staff. It's self-regulated. It's clean. It's popular. It's well-utilized. And there's not one category that's come up that he's identified that you can tell me that 60% of our population participate in. And I'm going to remind you again, 60% of our population are dog owners. And whether it's pickleball, whether it's lawn bowling, whether it's skateboarding, you can't, even volleyball, you can't tell me that 60% of our population participates in those activities. So you're ignoring 60% of our population. We don't need a dog run. We don't need a dog park. We have an open beach. And there are many different ways to approach it. And each city has approached it differently. Some limit the hours. Some give unlimited access. And it just takes a little bit of creativity, and it costs you near nothing to implement. And you're talking about all these CIPs that are underfunded, and this would be pretty much free. So I think I'll limit my comments to that. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Jim Fasola.
Hello, my name is Jim Fasola. I'm on the board of directors of Hermosa Beach Little League, and I'm here to talk about the Clark Field project, the improvement project, some of the things we want to do, and which is big on our list and part of the master plan. I wanted to pass out a couple photos of some of the things we want to fix. Can I give these? Yeah. Right. So, first of all, the improvements to the park focus on North Field and also a little bit at South Field. But everybody we've spoken to has been supportive of the project. We haven't encountered any opposition. We plan to fund this completely through donations through Hermosa Beach Little League. Little League is extremely popular in Hermosa Beach. We easily get our maximum of 450 players per year. And about half of the families in Hermosa Beach play and have a kid that plays in Little League during their time in Hermosa Beach. So on a typical Saturday, when we have 4 games going on from T-ball up to the seniors, we get about 1,000 people in the park on every Saturday during the season, and almost that many on Sundays. So it's a huge community undertaking, or it's a great community amenity, and it's very family-oriented. Little League, it's critical. And that is a critical thing about Little League, is that it brings families together. It's something kids rarely do by themselves. It's a family event. It's not like a skateboard park where a couple people may go on, use it. For that matter, even though they're very popular and I like them, pickleball and volleyball tend to be kind of an individual thing. So Little League is a great community organization, and it's this community spirit that allows us that makes us confident we will get the donations, at least $500,000 to do this project. And so we just hope to get your support to keep, to put the Clark Field renovation in master plan, to keep it there. Thank you.
Next, we have Carla Buck.
Good evening. I represent a group of Hermosa Beach citizens that are passionate about a dog park. And we come here not only just with that idea, with the thought, but some ideas of where we think it might happen. One of which may be beach, but there are others as well. They're not the acre or half acre. And actually, if you do, we've done a couple seminars. If you look at a lot of the dog parks around there, actually Manhattan Beach has 2. They call them dog runs. They're less than 6,000 square feet. There's actually Glenella Dog Park in Marina del Rey. There's another wonderful one in Playa Vista. They're much smaller than a half an acre. They're actually more like in the 5, 6, maybe 7,000. I think we could do something like that. And not only do we have the idea, but I think we have the idea for funding. So we've talked about teaming with 501c3. We have these passionate citizens that we've kind of done some estimates on the back of the napkin. We think we can figure out a way to not only fund it, but help you guys maintain it. What we actually ask for is the will and the ability to partner with you guys. So that's what I'd just like to bring up tonight. I welcome any opportunity to discuss further with any of you guys. Thank you.
Next, we have Mark Mamber.
Hey, everybody. I'll apologize for my sunglasses. I've got some light sensitivity that's going on. And I didn't know what to expect this evening. I'm here representing Hermosa Beach Little League and specifically the improvements that we'd love to make at Clark Field. We've been thinking and talking about this for years internally among the HBLL board of directors, and it just feels like everything with the Parks Master Plan, everything's been sort of culminating, to this meeting. And again, I didn't know what to expect, but after seeing the presentation and listening to everybody's comments and questions, I feel extremely optimistic. I feel great about what's happening here. As I kind of digest everything that's been presented, I kept kind of I don't know, visualizing a Venn diagram of all these considerations that have to be taken into when you've got 30 CIP projects that have been, that have been identified and need to be prioritized and haven't been funded. I mean, that is an overwhelming task, but again, coming back to this Venn diagram of how do you go about prioritizing that, some of the bubbles that came to mind while I was listening. One being a bubble of community desire and sentiment. One being community use, getting the biggest bang for the buck. One being space, seems to be a pretty major issue in our small city here, and then the other one being cost. And what feels, again, selfishly, I think our project really just kind of hits the bullseye in all four of those bubbles. I was thrilled to see that the sentiment, the community sentiment towards this, towards improving Clarkfield was very high. I saw it ranked number 2, top 5 of everything through both the qualitative and quantitative data points that you took in over the course of this project process. As far as community use, Jim touched on it. I mean, we've got a near 30% penetration among every age-eligible kid in the city of Hermosa Beach plays Little League, so we have a major involvement from the community at large. As far as space, I mean, lots of people, I have my own personal opinion on pool because we have a really great ocean, but as far as space, is concerned, or dog parks, I love my dog. I'd love to take her to a dog park, but we have some very serious space constraints here. The improvements that we want to make to Clark Field do not have any negative impact, any major, require any major overhaul of the existing facility. We want to move some fences back. We want to replace the backstop. We want to improve the field of play. We want to just basically generally improve the playability and the view spectator experience at the park without, again, impacting any major space issues. And then the cost, bubble is obviously a major one. We intend to fund this
Mark, you've gone
project
over your time.
entirely, so that checks that box. A 900-page document sounds pretty gnarly. I have no idea what happens from here, what happens at the city council meeting next month, but I'm really hoping to advance this project in a fast fashion. Thank you for the extra time.
Chair Lang, I have no more public comment speaker cards at this time.
Do we have anyone online?
We have no hands raised at this time.
And Chair Lang, since we do have a few people who haven't spoken, it may be wise to solicit the crowd to see if there's any more people that want to.
Absolutely, thank you. If anybody didn't give any cards but would like to address commission, now's your time.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Brian Scheel, and I'm running for City Council. Nancy said everything that I wanted to say. There's a lot of baseball talk tonight. Mark, I hope you get everything you want. And there's a lot of baseball on TV, but it's deja vu all over again, to borrow a term from Yogi Berra. We've hired a consultant to tell us what we know already. You have 70% of what's been recommended is already in the works, and half of that is stalled. So I just feel like, again, in Hermosa Beach, we're hiring consultants to tell us what we already know, and the projects are already underway. That's my takeaway. But I thank you. It was a great presentation, and see you later.
Hello, Laura Pena. I'm a resident here who submitted the only public comment in this process, and I'm here to talk about community engagement, which is kind of ironic because that's what this has been all about. I want to thank the commission. I want to thank the staff. It was a great report. visually. My question is this the right time? And what I mean by that is, I thank you, Commissioner Rain, for bringing up the fact that it was 900 pages, but that didn't include the 235 if you wanted to go back to look at the 1990 Park Master Plan. So this is over 1,100 pages that you're expecting the community to provide feedback on in a thoughtful, concise manner. In addition to the fact that this meeting was timed during the elections when we are currently inundated with propositions and measures that we have to read. So my feedback on engagement is this is not a well-timed and thought-out date for the meeting. We should continue this so the public has the ability, so that some of our commissioners have the ability to read this 1,152 pages of very important information. This is going to be, as the presentation showed, the next 30 years. It's a living document, I understand, but we need to take this seriously. And if we are going to invest the kind of time and energy and resources that the staff was talking about, we need to make sure that we know what we're doing and that we give the public. If over 6,000 touch points were given on the presentation and we have 19,000 residents and 4,689 total page views on the website, how many were they unique? Because when I look at the design of the study, I'm challenged by the fact that we have 3 modes. And one of the modes was the stakeholder groups, which represented 12, as I understand. And then the second was the workshops, which were 513. And then we had the multimodal of 639. If the stakeholder interviews were allowed to give their opinion for 1 hour, and then they were also allowed to attend the interviews and the workshops, and then they were also given the ability to respond to the survey, does that overweight preferences? Does that necessarily weight some people's opinions of what we need in our programs and services or not? I don't know. I value everybody's opinion. I enjoyed the workshop. I enjoyed learning. I enjoyed hearing questions. But we need leadership on this. And we need leadership to make sure that we are represented. Not just the people who have the most outspoken voices, but the people that can't be here tonight. I'm challenged by the fact that we had so much engagement, and 12 of my community members are here. Thank you so much for showing up. This is important. We need to get this right. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to address the commission? I see no. We'll close it right now, and we'll bring it back to commission discussion. And I think we'll start with Tom on my right.
Okay. The last shall be first. Primarily, I want to use my time to talk about some small bore projects that we can do that might make a difference in the next 6 months to a year, so we get some payback from the project immediately. But as far as large scale down the road, I completely agree that Clark Field should be a priority. And I think most of the community would support improving Clark Field. I completely support that. Another large-scale down-the-road priority I don't think there's much community support for, although there's more support than I thought there was, which is looking at the Strand and whether or not it needs to be separated into bike and walk lanes down the road. It's a much more difficult topic. As far as small projects I think we could really do, we can do a dog's park the size of Manhattan. I measured it exactly at about 6,000 square feet, 300 times 20. 3 or 4 people at a time use it. That can go in on the east side of Valley Park. It could go in on the south side of Valley Park, or it could go along Clark Field. That would be my least favorite. But there are locations we could put a 6,000 square foot dog park in town, and that could be done fairly quickly. As far as the pool, I think the immediate solution is to just have swim lessons brought through our classes, through our portal where we do classes. We engage somebody that will provide the swim lessons. We offer them to our community. We pay one of the local aquatic facilities, whether it's El Segundo, Redondo, Manhattan, to get an hour of time once a week. We bus the kids from the community center to the lesson, and then they come back. I mean, I think that would be a quick way to look at the pool situation, because otherwise there is public use of these pools. And then I'll do two quick ones, and then I'm going to give it to Tracy. I would change the municipal code so that park maintenance, the parkland itself and the park facilities, that falls within the joint jurisdiction of our commission, the Parks and Recreation Commission. Our commission is the one that looks at the parks all the time. Public Works has a much more things on their plate than just the parks. When we inquire about park facility improvements, maintenance, what we're told is, yes, we will get you that answer, but that's not within your purview. That is within the Public Works Commission. I think if we were to change the code to put it in a joint purview, we would actually get more responsiveness on some really simple issues, like seating and really simple things. And then the last one comes out of Zach's appendix. I had two of them. I only give one of them. Zach had a volunteers in park discussion, which is reach out to the community and get people who are near each of these parks to see whether or not they want to become sort of a steward of that park for a year or two. Those people can then look at landscaping, small-scale landscaping. K-Edo, for example, has just a fringe planting area that a volunteer could take care of. There's a slope at Fort, lots of fun that a volunteer could be planting. If we had people near Ocean View that would become volunteers in the park for that park, I think we could probably reimagine that park. So I would encourage the city to look at developing a volunteers in the park program, and then I'll give it to Tracy.
Those are really good ideas. I like that. I like what we're doing here in the sense that there is real practical information for right now and looking ahead to the future. I appreciated what Laura said. I also know that our commission meeting is next week and City Council will review this as well. So there will be more opportunity for the public to get engaged. I think Hermosa Beach Little League are excellent partners, and I agree with Tom that that should be one of the forefront things that we could move forward quickly. As far as other things, everyone's going to have their own personal opinion. I have mine as to what I want to see moving forward, and that's why this discussion is so important. I liked your idea a lot about partnering through like community classes with the pool to see whether we could use Beg Pool, we could use Maricosta's pool. I'm sure Redondo has one as well when school's out to do that. So I think those are some really good ideas. I think that's it for now. I'll reserve my right to come back. Oh, you don't need this.
Thank you to everyone. It's always good to hear everyone's opinions. And as Tracy said, we all have our own. Not going in any particular order, I've met with Carla Buck and appreciate the enthusiasm that her group has, and have been through Valley Park and do think there are places that we can try and find for a dog park. What I would like to say, especially to Mr. Perillo, is I have contacted Long Beach, I have contacted Del Mar, and I have contacted Santa Barbara. And although different areas do have dog parks or dog beaches, they do come with issues. It's not just opening it up to the public, that there are city problems that come up with cleanliness or complaints and having to have people come down. So it's not just free. It is something that we should look into, absolutely. And I do appreciate the fact that residents are getting creative, whether it's HB Little League coming up with their own plans, trying to find their own funding. The collaboration is important, and I look forward to that. So I do want to figure out how to find a place for our dogs. I'm going to assume after being on a number of subcommittees that there's a lot to it that we don't already know for city staff. One more thing that we need staff to do. But I am happy to donate my time to try and figure that out. I also am happy to try and figure out how to work with HB Little League. If they can find their funding, that this would be an amazing opportunity and something, fortunately or unfortunately, something would have to be delayed, and I get that. So we'll have to see where that goes. Regarding the comments about this report, I get it. We're a small town, and everybody thinks that they already know what it is we need and how we can do it, but that's not so. And we have staff that is so overwhelmed as it is. A report like this would have been 3 years in the making easily by going department to department and trying to reach out to the community, setting up these meetings, coming up with all of these diagrams, all the science behind it. So yes, does it look like a lot of money? It is. It's a lot of money to do something right. And it is a 30-year plan. And it is something that cities do use constantly to go back to. So we can argue over the amount of money that was spent. It was spent, as far as I'm concerned, it was spent well. It was spent in a timely fashion. And I appreciate everyone, the availability that RJM allowed for us to call, to us to contact. I know that John Jones was a cost, but I know for a fact, after working with staff, whether or not it was our past director or our new director, that there is so much on their plate, whether it's picking up a phone, getting a phone call from a council member that say, hey, the Rams want to come to town. It's only a couple of months. Or I have this other fabulous idea through the Kings, even though I'm a Ducks fan. There are all kinds of delays. And something like this was started and it was finished. And it will be a useful document for us to have. I did read the old document. I believe it was hand-typed, which is pretty amazing. So I understand. We're never going to please everybody, but I am extraordinarily grateful to everyone that worked on this, the subcommittee. I really appreciate Tom Maroney sitting down with me, going over many documents and ideas. And I'll leave it at that. There's more to say, but I think right now that's all everyone needs to hear from me right now.
Okay, next. So thank you, everybody, again, for being here and your public comments. I'm going to just kind of go through my notes here in no particular order. And some of the things that I am bringing up are a little bit more kind of little technicalities with the report that I noticed, and then some other issues. One was in the appendix in terms of funding sources on a state level, places to go. It just needs to be updated that the CCHE, the California Cultural and Historic Endowment, is not part of the state library. It's not under there, it's under natural resources. I would like to get it back to the state library. It makes more sense. It's kind of neglected where it is, but just in terms of where it is, if you want to, that would be an update to put it in the right place. Let's see. We discussed a lot of that. Okay, so there was a suggestion in terms of the different park types and looking at different ways to categorize them. And I was wondering initially what it was meant by the linear park. I hadn't heard about a linear park before, and then I'm like looking at the description, and then I'm looking on the map and I'm saying, oh, they are referring to the green belt here. And some of the items that defined this area I don't think are compatible with the green belt in terms of the linear park. More playgrounds and plazas and other things that are, kind of bringing in more built-in structures to an area that really should be referred to as more of a nature trail. And so what I would suggest is that we consider switching out, since under linear park, the only park that's listed there is the Greenbelt, is consider that category as a nature and recreation trail category instead. That was originally part of the Rail to Trails program, so I think that makes more sense. It is looked at as one of our few kind of nature walk places we can go, and it's considered very special by a lot of the residents. So that was something I wanted to bring up. And I think it might have been on the city website, I'm trying to remember now, but some of the, for the total acreage of Valley Park, I saw listed 5.33 acres versus 8-something, so I'm wondering which one is accurate, because that also matters if we're looking at other uses and adding in things like, a dog park or a dog run. We need to know that we have the space for it, and that probably is the best place for some sort of dog activation area, but I just wanted to make sure that was accurate. I did have some other ideas in terms of ways that we can support, our dog-loving community. I am as well. I have always had a dog, but we could also maybe consider some special, events or days that we could allow on one of the fields, like, kind of dog days in Hermosa Beach or something like that, to give the community a chance to have fun, and it could be coordinated with maybe Friends of the Park or something like that. There would have to be some regulations around that your dog has to be licensed, has to be vaccinated, but to open up other opportunities that aren't maybe on a permanent basis, but there might be some creative ways that we can explore letting the dogs and their owners have a little bit more fun. I do agree that we have issues with the pool. It'd be really fun to have. I wish we had more spaces, but we do have some great alternatives very close by, as has been mentioned. Our students are able to choose to attend either Miracosta in Manhattan Beach or go to Redondo Beach's high school. They both have lovely pool facilities, and so I think these joint use agreements are a great idea, and I love Tom's suggestion to tie it in with our online class portal to give residents, to make it seem more legitimate and more of a buy-in. I think that's a great idea. What I didn't see in this was something that we've discussed in joint meetings before in terms of the Park Commission's role. We have a role in cultural assets, but also we have discussed our role in art and public art in the community. And I don't see any mention and I could have missed it because I haven't completely read through everything, but I didn't see any mention of looking at, public art or arts, and I would like to see that given some consideration for, and that could be another situation where we do move forward with both our commission and Public Works in terms of combining resources, but we don't have any sort of a real public arts program. I would also very aspirationally consider maybe even making one of the positions on the Parks and Rec board somebody that has a cultural background. But I would like to, I know there has been mention from both our city manager and others in the community about, creative about placemaking, and I think part of what we are discussing here is placemaking. I love the comment about, what do we want Hermosa Beach to mean to people? So what do we want it to mean to people? And that also connects with creative placemaking. And there is, by the way, right now, a state program, Arts in the Parks, and there's funding available for that. But it's something that won't be going on forever, so it's something you have to act on. But anyway, I do think that we should be including creative placemaking and a role for the Parks Commission in that. I did see that we're looking at, I know there's a Public Works approved tree list. That would be great to update, especially with more native species. And I think that we should also look at gearing our tree list, but also expanding it to look at other shrubs and landscapes that are native and water-saving plants that we could use to replace, like where we're pulling up the ice pond and other things. And when we do the list, it should be sensitive to where we're looking at. Like the Greenbelt would be more, kind of a little more rustic and natural. Our other parks would be more groomed. I was very curious about, for another discussion, but for the Greenbelt, whether we had a plan for that, because I've asked several times in the past, is there some sort of a blueprint, a plan for the Greenbelt? I'm seeing a lot of the ice plant being removed and replaced with grass. I don't think grass is a great solution, and I would like to know what our overall plan is for the Greenbelt, and we should develop a plan for the Greenbelt. We also need to look at bringing in the path. It's kind of bled out in places, and it's too wide. We're taking away some of the greenness of the Greenbelt. There are concerns from the community about the accessibility project that we're doing, that we're going to encourage more e-bikes on there. One thing in terms of future design is looking at how we can maybe curve it a little bit, make it a little more interesting, so it's not more like our straight road, that it's more curved a bit to discourage people thinking of it as a road. It would also be more aesthetically pleasing as well. Let's see, yeah, so that's, because I've gotten a lot of comments about the Greenbelt, what's going on with it, and trees replacement, et cetera. I also don't think it should be a place that we're looking at in terms of policy, in terms of a place that we hold a lot of events. I think we need to give residents a break and have a place that they know 7 days a week they can go to and recreate. So I would say that would be an interesting policy to put in place, that we don't want to really overwhelm the Greenbelt with events there. So we have one place that they can just go to and unwind. I think it's a great idea to look at a nonprofit, a companion nonprofit for Parks and Rec. It would have been really great if we had that for the Clark Building. There could be naming opportunities there. The community theater, it would be great to have a nonprofit foundation in place to help with fundraising efforts there, because there will be a lot of naming opportunities when we revamp that, and that should also be a priority project, I feel, along with Clark Field. We could also consider like public art endowment. I think maybe a community volunteer ranger program would be nice, that we could even have our own city-designed, merit badge to give out if we were working with, jointly with Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Little League, baseball, et cetera, get them to adopt a park and do work and, make it a fun program. We do have a naming rights program in place, as was mentioned. The language in the plan, I was a little bit concerned about. It said actively search for contributions from corporations and businesses to acquire naming or licensing rights from the city to advertise their name product. I think the naming rights program that we came up with, that a subcommittee worked on very hard on that. We were trying to avoid over-commercialization of our public buildings and spaces and to make sure that there was a history connection or something that really felt right for the community. So I would suggest, in terms of a language revise, something to the effect of judiciously reach out to businesses and corporations regarding naming licensing rights with ties or compatibility, ties to the city or compatible partnership potential with the city of Hermosa Beach. And that's it for now, but I'll be back after I read the other 900 pages. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, once again, great stats, really gives us a clear direction of how to move forward in the next couple of years. Pool, I think that's something we've discussed forever and a day as long as I've been up here, but I think that's a great example of joint use as RMJ recommended. I really like what fellow commissioner said. What do we want Hermosa to be known for? And I think if we use that as a filter moving forward with advancing some of these projects, that's a good way to look at it. I think what we want to be known for is our world-class beach. I think to summarize it, that's my opinion. I keep hearing quality of beach over and over and over again from not only the community, but even in this report. And at the end of the day, we're a town of doers, DIY all day. Let's empower the dog owner community. Sounds like there's 60% of citizens in Hermosa are dog owners. Let's empower them. Let's get a subcommittee going that consists of both commissions plus city council so we can help advance that, look at other options, and then quite frankly, let's do the same with the Clark Field. Let's get a subcommittee of all commissions plus city council to move forward and give them a blueprint on how to empower these motivated folks who clearly have a vision, clearly have funding in place, and this is something that will be the crown jewel of Hermosa Beach, and it's something that will bring the community together and make us all proud. Thank you.
Wow, this is good. First of all, let me just go back and summarize. This meeting includes both park and recreations and public works. Public works has a lot of responsibility all over the city, including roads, sewers, and everything. But one of our major projects is working with parks and park buildings and so forth. So we are a critical player in that, and that nothing can be done physically in these fields unless the public works are involved. And so I'm glad we're connected. Also, this meeting, we're just taking input and suggestions, and we are then accepting and just reporting back to the city council. We are not taking any action. This is just a study session. We're just going to review and file, correct? Is that the right word? The reports here. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And any suggestions we have or comments that we go back to the city council for consideration. I'm glad we're having this at this time. There's never a perfect time. And we've had, the public has had all kinds of opportunity to participate. And there's no perfect time. And this is just another step towards the process. And what we've had tonight is good. Even this 90,000-page report, it's good because it shows a lot of diversity. I have a couple questions first for, I guess mainly Joe. Where are we on the Clark Field now?
Could I ask you to clarify your question about Clark Field? Any specific project or just in general with
Just general.
everything in Clark
Where
Field?
are we on the list of things to be done? Where is Clark Field full?
Sure. I mean, well, Clark Building, under construction.
Right.
We are in late stages of design for Kelly Court, so that's the pickleball court, trying to restore that to 4 courts. That project also includes resurfacing of the pickleball, basketball, and tennis court. We're looking at reconfiguring all of them and renovating it. Okay. That is late stages. I'm hoping to be able to advertise that for construction within a few months. We'll continue to provide updates on that, but we're getting very close to realizing that. We do have a lighting assessment CIP. It's only funded to do preliminary lighting photometrics, looking at what kind of lighting we have and come up with larger, what would the long-term cost be for design and construction of lighting enhancements. That's at Clark Field as well as Valley Park and South Park. That project has been delayed until we have staffing capacity to take it on, so it's still a year or two out, but that would look at all the lighting in that park, but it's something that's currently partially programmed in the CIP. There are unfunded needs at Clark Field. There's been long since identified need to upgrade the stands, the seating around Clark Field. That's been an unfunded project for many years. We have the lawn bowling facility, which is a known location where we need to do repairs to the building. We at one time had a roofing CIP last year that included the roof on the lawn bowling facility. It was, after further investigation, it was removed because the building actually requires much more improvements before a new roof can be put on it. So that's been tabled and moved to the civic facilities assessment, where we can do a more detailed facility assessment for that building to really understand what the cost impact is going to be to put a roof on that building, as well as where the other larger upgrade needs are for that facility. So there's a number of things in process in that complex area that are known, and there's also unidentified projects that staff is aware of that are likely to come forward in the future. For example, we have a number of retaining walls that engineering has been monitoring that will need to be improved at some point. We're monitoring them, but they will need to be rebuilt. It's not a fun project, but something that's going to need to be done. There's resurfacing needs throughout the entire park, both the parking lot near Base 3 and through the loop road through the field. And then there's Base 3 next to it that needs substantial renovation as well, and that's including the civic facilities project. So there's a number of different efforts that are ongoing through there, and then we continue to assess the needs as they come up, either identified through the community or as engineering team or community resources identifies them.
So it's on our radar, and a lot of some of the things are in process.
Absolutely.
Okay. The other question is, this is the first time I heard this of a dog beach. Is there any restrictions, regulations, or anything about using part of the beach for a dog park?
I'll jump in, and maybe our city attorney can save me or add some color to it. But I suspect that we may need to understand whether or not there's a permit approval from Coastal Commission to allow that. But City Attorney Donegan?
Yeah, correct. That would be my first idea that popped into my head. And then similarly, there would likely need to be some level of infrastructure installed and maintained to ensure that the dogs stay in.
Okay, so that'd be a Coastal Commission issue then?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, a couple of things that came up. The dog, obviously, I'm a dog supporter, and we've been talking about this for many, many years, and our biggest issue is space, again. And part of the problem with the parks is that you have to get not only space, but you have to get permission from all the neighbors. They have to sign off on it. Another one to look at is in El Segundo. They have a dog park right in the middle of their park. It's a smaller one, and then I suggest people go and look at that. I'm not opposed to continue to pursue the concept of a dog area. We just have not, over the years, been able to find an appropriate one within our city because of what you said, space and public use and so forth. Also, as far as nonprofits and fundraising, I know Friends of the Park has spent a lot of money buying equipment for the parks. Kiwanis has spent a lot of money buying equipment for the community center. We've bought lights, we have bought mirrors, we've different things that we have bought. So approach, if anybody has a nonprofit that want to work with the city to do that. The nice thing about that is you don't have to go out for bid. Some projects nonprofits can't do because it involves actual city structures, like rebuilding a building or a maintenance issue that would have to be done by staff. And again, staff is already stretched, so it's very hard to get that done. Also, scouts, their projects, they often need projects. So a lot of times, if there's a city project they can do, that's another source to come in. I understand that 90,000 years ago, they did try to have a bike path on the beach, and it was voted down, and to do it again, you'd have to have an ordinance passed by the public, is that correct? To get approval to have a bike path on the beach. Is that my understanding, or is that a coastal commission question also?
I mean, for sure, that would be a coastal commission. I'm not aware of any voter requirement. However, I've not looked into it, so that one I'm not going to be able to opine on.
Yeah. Joe, do you know? No.
I would have to also do further research. I thought I heard there was a potential older deed restriction that needs further interpretation on the beach, but once again, it would definitely require further research.
Right. Kathy will know more about that, but I remember hearing that it has to be an ordinance approved by the residents, and the residents had voted it down. But that's something to pursue again, possibly. Some of the other issues that came up that wasn't discussed, but were in the report, I think people need to be aware of benches. People ask about benches, and we have a lot of benches around the city, and benches already are donated by groups or private families. What they have to realize, though, is they also are responsible for maintaining that bench. And if they don't, then the bench is removed, and we have to find the family that does the plaque. Plus, there's also limited place to put the benches. So that's become an issue also. Regarding the green belt, Joe, isn't that one group now, a nonprofit group that are working on refurbishing the green belt?
So on the Greenbelt, we are partnered with the South Bay Parkland Conservancy for certain dedicated areas to plant and maintain native plants. But those are in certain locations, it's not for the entirety of the Greenbelt. And that's really as we're monitoring that progress and a bit of a pilot program through that, but it is limited to certain blocks.
Okay. Again, sponsorship, getting groups to sponsor help as grant writers. If anyone knows of a good grant writer that want to donate their time and build their salary into that, definitely we could use their help on that. There's a lot of opportunities for that. The problem with public funding, it's limited, and it's also very specified. So you can only use it for certain projects they have. I really like the report. I think we need to endorse it with these suggestions. We are still in process, but I really like what we heard so far.
Thanks. I want to start out with a question. A lot of people have talked about the stakeholder interviews, but one thing I didn't see in your presentation but was in your report, can you talk about the different sports organizations that you contacted during the process? Or I don't need the
I have that
specific.
information,
I don't need the
actually.
specifics. The point is that there's a lot of people that are talking about that there weren't enough stakeholders, but I want people to understand that Little League and youth basketball and AYSO were all contacted with specific interviews for this process, correct?
Yes, I believe we had a total of 5,663 players as part of those organizations.
Okay, like I said, it wasn't a presentation, but it was in the report, so I just wanted to make people aware of that. Laura Pena talked about community engagement. Community engagement is always frustrating for us. We always feel that there's not enough. It seems like no matter what we do, I
bribed some people in an organization that I'm part of that I will not name with drinks for after one of the workshops, and I only got 1 or 2 people to take me up. You know, and so it is frustrating. I think tonight we're probably more affected by Dodgers than the election. But you know, all I can say is get your friends out there. There's lots of time for people to complain later, but not enough time to participate when something can be done. I think it was Yanni started talking about that everybody has different priorities. I'm not going to talk so much about the different items on here because, you know, some of them are big priorities for me and some of them I don't care about. But the reason that we did this report is to find out what priorities are out there, and to just say that you know, we already knew what was going to be in the report. Yes, but you know, it's a little that we still need that information so that later when council, and it is council who will make the ultimate priority decisions as to what moves forward and when, but they will have data to look at to say, oh, it seems like pickleball was the most important, or it seems like a pool was the most important, and they're not just picking it because that's their pet project. So they have some data to work from. And I think that's it. The last thing I want to say, again, the council, you know, we all make recommendations, council makes decisions. So, you know, ultimately, for those of the public who want to get something done, the council is who you need to convince that your priorities need to be their priorities. So, thank you.
Yeah. Just to revisit a few things very briefly, because I think most of it's been covered, but as far as the pool or swimming goes, we have, Miracosta has brand new athletic and swimming pool. Redondo Union has actually an aquatic center. I think they already have a collaboration. There's 24-hour fitness. And that seems like a good way to meet the needs of the community and the desires of the community, maybe aside from the splash pad. Not quite sure what that is, but I have an image in my mind, so I'll stick with that. So there are a lot of options out there. And obviously, you know, it's no fun to sign up for a swimming course in January and say, yeah, we're going to go down the beach. I understand that. So it's good to have both options. As far as the Strand goes, I think because of the Coastal Commission and because of the available space, it seems a little bit unrealistic to build anything additional there. I don't know. But I also know that the Coastal Commission has to get involved, and it seems like enforcement and education are having some good effects. So maybe, as people have pointed out, that's a good way to go. On the dog park, beach is problematic, not only because of hygiene, but also because there are a lot of families that go to the beach and bring their kids, little kids, and if you have dogs running around off leash, that can really quickly be a problem. I've been to Long Beach, to the dog park there, and it's great, but the beach, the layout, the geography is very different, and there's typically not a bunch of little kids in the water or on the shore there. And I know that in Manhattan, not Manhattan Beach, but Manhattan, New York, there are dog parks, and some of them are pretty small, and they make it work. So maybe we could somehow find a little corner here or there and figure it out with local residents' permissions, of course. And one of the things that's been mentioned a few times is grant application writers. Now, I don't know if this is a viable option, but there are probably university students who are studying public policy or nonprofit management or things like that who need a little bit of experience and who would be delighted to have the opportunity to come in to do a few hours here or there on a part-time basis to help out, perhaps. And regarding, there were some really good comments here. I thought that was really nice to hear some of the things that came out. And as my colleague here mentioned, community engagement does take time. And there's nothing here that needs to rush. There's nothing here there's not a building falling into the sea, right? We're not Palos Verdes and, you know, things are disappearing off the edge of a cliff. So it is good. I think it's good to move forwards. You know, we have a limited budget. it's good to have a plan and a vision. There were some suggestions, we should just stop, we shouldn't do anything. Stopping and not doing anything leads to stagnation. Stagnation leads to ending up in a backwater that's really hard to get out of. We've seen that on a national scale in certain countries, and we've seen that on a smaller scale in certain cities. So I think having a vision, having something to move forward with, in whatever capacity we're able to, is important. And I also would add that so I've only lived here for 5 years, as I pointed out. I wouldn't necessarily have known that all of the things were brought up were important things for the community because of what I participate in and what I'm interested in and how old my kids are. So I think having objective external research is really important. It validates, it confirms our assumptions, what everyone knows, whether or not they know it or not. And it provides important basis for decision-making further up, as you pointed out. However, I do think we could potentially extend the comment period and allow people to continue to provide suggestions through a suggestion box or through some mechanism. Might want to look into IP filtering to make sure that people don't spam the inbox hundreds or thousands of times. We need this, 'cause that happens. So IP filtering and some of the other stuff you mentioned is good. And just to conclude my comments, I mentioned earlier, it's nice to have a differentiator. We can't do everything. What can we do that really kind of sets us apart? And listening to the comments, when I moved here, my kids were too old to get into Little League, but it sounds like that's actually kind of a differentiator in one sense for families with kids. That's something that really brings the community together, and I assume there are other schools that come here visiting from all over the state, or all over the city at least, or county. So there's a lot of people that come in that experience our wonderful community through Little League. So that seems like a really natural point to start. And then finding one additional thing that kind of will help bring visitors, right? And then maybe will appeal to people who aren't necessarily in Little League or are not in that part of the activity spectrum. And it sounds like there's already some thoughts being made there. So I think that's really good, again, to kind of, we've got this really special thing that no one else has, So that's what I would like to contribute. Thank you.
Thanks, Tor. Before I forget, I want to thank my fellow commissioners for giving me the opportunity to serve on the subcommittee for this project. I know there was at least one other commissioner who I think was also interested, and I appreciate allowing me to do this. I think I learned a lot, helped round me out as a commissioner, given the relationship between the Parks and Recreation and Public Works. And I also enjoyed the opportunity to work with John and Zach and Kristen and, perhaps be able to nudge things a little bit in one direction in my own little way, even though I'm just one person. As far as the Parks Master Plan document goes, I recommend we go ahead and recommend it for approval. I generally agree with most of the goals, and I don't have any significant concerns or objections. One thing I got out of this, sort of looking at the glass half full, it looks like Hermosa's needs really are largely, if not completely, met by our existing programs and facilities. It sounds like there are other cities that don't necessarily have it as well as we do. I was impressed with the needs assessment, including the technical part of looking at what we have, but also with the public outreach activity to try to assess, what's the voice of the user of the community. So I was good with that. As far as recommendations and priorities, kind of comparing the needs versus the capabilities, how do we close the gap? I think the goals and recommendations that were surfaced were generally good, but I was kind of relieved, actually, or pleased that the goals were developed to be realistic, to really, understand that we do have some constraints in this city like everyone. As far as, and then just in terms of managing expectations, I think Suja and others, kind of help make it clear, but, I don't know that there's a commitment that we're going to meet all of these goals and all of the projects. We'll do what we can within our means, but it will be useful to help us drive priorities, absolutely. And for example, as we go through the budget cycle every year, there's a CIP study session as well as the budget study session. And so that's when the new CIP projects get proposed and formalized. And so I hope this document will help to inform those decisions. I've found that prioritization can be a challenge in the city in general. So I hope we can use this. Speaking about, and by the way, some of these I'm going to say you've heard over before, you probably inferred it from what others have said, but a big thing that I just came to realize is we do have some major constraints here, both financial and spatial. And so, you heard about the CIP backlog. We've heard about the city yard as a major project at some point, maybe a new civic center, things like that. And then in terms of space, we know that we're a densely populated city, pretty much built up and out and filled in to boot. So, as far as trying to satisfy some of the goals, we might have to repurpose some things, and as we go try to find solutions, maybe that's on the table. There's a specific goal that I kind of resonated with a little bit, this goal 6.1. It emphasized executing our current plans over new amenities. I don't think we can 100% do that, but certainly we got to keep working off our backload as we consider taking on new things. And also the realization that CIPs, even if we can get a lot of outside help and maybe some funding through the nonprofits, they still do take staff time to manage those, the oversight and all that. So while the help could be appreciated in some cases, it's not completely free to us, and it diverts staff resources from other projects. I was really pleased with the emphasis on partnerships, and especially in the case of a pool or finding ways to have swimming programs. This goes back to the point about how constrained we are financially and especially with space. So I was glad that the approach, 3.1 was a general goal, was put in there to foster partnerships with other cities, which would probably in most cases, I would think, be Manhattan and Redondo as far as the cities go. Because of our size, we can't always have one of everything for our own. Think about it, we don't have our own high school, for example. I couldn't help but throw that in as a kind of a big example there. And so in that case, that means some of our needs have to be met more regionally than locally. And so, and the Park Master Plan, for example, talks about Polywog and Beg pool for the aquatic. It mentions Dominguez Park for dogs. Ideally, it'd be nice if we didn't have to go so far, but this is part of, I guess, the give and take that's there. So yeah, so I'm going to talk about some of the more major recommendations and share some quick thoughts on those. With the pool, I agree with the goal to try to work through some sort of a joint agreement. I don't know enough about if people can just go to some of these facilities or we would actually have to get some formal permission. So I would just keep working that, but definitely pursue that. And as far as if we had our pool, I don't think they're cheap to operate as well as the cost to build either. So that was something that occurred to me. As far as a dog park, I'm hearing a lot of demand for something like that, so I don't think we can give up on looking into that. And I don't know a lot about it. I heard the beach idea. I heard about maybe we can find some land. One of the fundamental trade-offs could be, is there any value in versus completely dedicating some space? Do we find a way to do some sort of a timeshare of some existing space? But then I suppose you'd have to go through some cleanup cycle and stuff like that. And speaking of cleanup, the beach cleanup. So all right, I'll just leave it at that. So yeah, there are people who know more about this. Oh, my little bright idea, for what it's worth. And maybe this is a temporary solution, but You know, we got this area over here behind the post office over there, and I don't know if that's considered Edison right-of-way. And it gets kind of overgrown at certain times of the year, but, you know, that seemed like a good place for some dogs to go kicking up some dust. But again, we'd have to work with I think Edison it is. I don't know if it's AES or Edison, and then it's Redondo as well. And because they already have their own dog park further up the hill at Dominguez, I don't know if that would fly, but I just thought I'd throw it out there. And then on Clark Field, you know, we're starting to hear, you know, more from the Little League folks, and you know, and in general, we heard about, you know, back to that the quantitative work that was done on fields, and do we have enough? You know, I don't know if we can get more, but if we do something, maybe there's something with the layout that we could find a way to maybe milk a little more out of Clark. But the fact that the Clark complex, Clark Field is called out in the plan, you know, from a document point of view, I think that's at least a good thing, that gives something that we can anchor to moving forward when we get more serious about the details of a possible Clark renovation. So that's good, and so I hope that the Little League and the soccer folks are at least encouraged that we've got something to tie to in the plan. So I think that's good. Somehow, I don't think we talked much about lawn bowling. That's worth highlighting. We got a lot of participation and input from them. In one of the meetings, it almost felt like they were kind of stacking the room there. No, you know, all in fun. We understand you're avid and appreciate that. You know, it's kind of a Hermosa tradition. And getting back to this thing about being regional and how maybe we don't have a pool, I don't know how many other facilities like this there are here, but maybe this is some way that Hermosa gets to make its contribution to the region by having a nice lawn bowling facility that people from all over, you know, in the spirit of give and take, maybe this can be our contribution. So that thought occurred to me as well. So I'm good to see that there was a goal that was associated to support that. And then a few miscellaneous items. You know, there's a lot of emphasis on facilities and amenities, but one thing I really learned about Parks and Recreation through the privilege of being on the subcommittee is that don't forget about the programs, right? We talked a lot about facilities, but I was really impressed with how many programs we have, and it looks like staff is really productive in its ability to put on all these programs, and I want to make sure everybody really is aware of that and appreciates that. So got a shout out on that one. And then there's also the thing about the events. There's kind of a thing that you know, something of goal 2.4 talks about revisiting the number and size of events. I know you guys are all over that in your commission, but it seemed to make sense. And then the Parks Tree Planning List, I was trying to understand what that was. And you know, the Public Works Commission, we do hear requests for tree removals in the public right-of-way in the parkway, and we have a list that for what type of trees can be replaced there. And as I understand it, this additional list would be a broader list that would cover what we do in the parks. I believe I see Director San Clemente shaking his head that I got that right. So it's not an inventory, it would be more of a what do we want to replant with there. And then finally, there's a goal 6.2 that's about operations and maintenance. Our commission talks, you know, we're mostly involved with the capital improvements and the development side of things. We need to consider operation and maintenance. But, you know, just to remember, you know, we always have to think about operations and maintenance and factor those into our plan. So just to make that point and re-hammer that. And so to see it actually had its own goal associated with it was good. So I felt a sense of completeness that you were able to account for that important part of Public Works. And that's all I got, and thanks for your time and hearing me.
I'll be short. I did want to say thank you to the Little League board members who came. I think they perform a great service to Hermosa Beach as far as our Little League children that range in all different ages. So I think we need to give them as much support as we can. But also Hermosa Beach does give a lot to our children. The community center offers basketball for the children, the parks offer, and schools offer soccer. So we have a lot of events going on with the children there. My only other comment is that we always need more parks for children. So unfortunately, we cannot increase our park area, but I would like to see us retain our park areas for our children and our families. I do like the idea that the city has gone into partnership with the Hermosa Beach schools for various activities. And also, I think that maybe, as David and several other people have commented, that we can go into partnership with Manhattan Beach and Redondo Beach as far as the pools. And I think those were basically all my comments. Thank you for a nice evening and all the comments. And I'm going to return it to Yanni for adjournment.
Thank you very much, everybody. Lisa, do you have all the information that you need?
Yes, I do, Chair Lang. Just to really summarize the points that came across the most in the commissioner comments, there is support for consideration of advancing looking into dog-friendly programs, amenities, a run or an area at a park. There is support for Clark Field improvements. There's support for fostering partnerships and joint use agreements for pool access and aquatic programs and additional recreation facilities to expand programming. So those were the most common comments across all, both of the commissions. And then I will do my best to address all the other feedback in a supporting attachment to the council agenda.
And then RJM, do you guys have everything you need?
Yes, we do.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Are we just going to go to adjournment, or do we have to make a motion for receiving and filing?
There's no formal need for
No
a
formal
motion.
need,
for
okay.
receive and file.
Well,
hang on, Angie, give us 1 second. Let us adjourn the meeting.
okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, once again, thank you to everybody involved in this process. For a lot of us, it was a long time coming. We appreciate it. To the subcommittees, to the commission, to staff, to our consultants, we appreciate it. Go Dodgers. Have a safe Halloween. And then can I get a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
There we go. Thank you very much, everyone.
Sorry, Chair.